Hagmann Report for today. It is Monday, August 25th, 2014. I'm Doug Hagmann, co-host along with my son, Joe Hagmann, in studio together. We are the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. Folks, you're about to hear 3 hours of unbiased and uncensored information, news and information analysis that you're not going to get in the mainstream media. You're listening to the only show where the news is presented to you in 3D. We look beyond the headlines and bylines, a fog of disinformation, misinformation, misdirection to bring you the news that you need to know. For new listeners, thanks for checking in, by the way. I do really appreciate it when you send an email saying, hey, I'm listening over here in the Philippines, or hey, I'm listening in Guatemala or wherever, or even Iowa. I like that, too. Thanks for checking in with us and letting us know where you're listening from. Welcome to the program. For the new listeners, we broadcast live each and every weeknight from 8 to 11 p.m. Eastern Time. Our new home base, you can find us on the Internet at our new home base. That's HagmannandHagmann.com, HagmannandHagmann.com. Now, we're also simulcast by the Christians United Broadcasting Network. There you can tune us in at thehagmannandHagmannReport.com, not to be confused with HagmannandHagmann.com. Now, thank you for joining us, deliberately listening to us, as you could be doing a myriad of other things tonight, barbecuing, or depending on your time zone, eating breakfast, or sitting at a coffee shop. Just want to say thank you for your belief and trust in us as we walk through this minefield of current events together. Tonight we're going to have a fantastic show for you. Mr. Steve Quayle from stevequayle.com, in conjunction with a medical doctor who was on before. Don't want to say he held back a little bit, but he held back a little bit. And really not really. Just this is kind of an updated follow-up program from the last show. Folks, I'm going to tell you something. Make sure you listen very carefully to what is being said tonight. And I just want to give my special thanks out to Mr. Steve Quayle from stevequayle.com. Folks, if you're new to this program and if you haven't visited stevequayle.com, please bookmark his website. Pay very close attention to his alert section, and you will find that you will learn so much. And I want to thank him for linking to one of my articles, Understanding the ISIS Threat. With that, Joe, welcome, and Steve, welcome to the program, sir.
Good evening, Doug. Good evening, Joe. And Dr. S. he's on with us now, correct?
We're looking for him. We don't have his area code.
Possibly.
Okay, let me give you the area code, 417.
Yeah, we have him right here. Dr.
Okay. Yep. Okay. Well, tonight we're going to do something we didn't do last time. Of course, things have changed since, Doug, I think it was, 2 weeks ago that we were on, possibly 3. And I asked Dr. S. to basically, he had contacted me and said, Steve, we've got a triple red alert coming. And I said, this time, Dr. S., share with people the state of the medical profession now, the inability to handle overwhelming cases at the same time, the drug shortages that are appearing under the best of conditions long before the immigration became the overwhelming, I would say, insane policy that we're seeing playing out before us. And I want to make this clear, and then I'm going to turn it over immediately to Dr. S., and we'll go back and forth through the night. You cannot even attempt to say we're trying to stop Ebola, dengue, tuberculosis, chikungunya, encephalitis, equine encephalitis, any of the hemorrhagic fevers, or any other of the myriad of viruses and bacteria that are coming across the border in all of the non-checked immigrants. So we're being flooded, but this is asymmetric warfare. That's the word that basically, Doug, no one will admit to in the mainstream press. Maybe there's some of them are starting to get a little bit bolder, but the point is this is the total overwhelming of the system. And in the best of times, and as Doc will talk, he'll talk about just what's going on right now in the medical field. And what we're watching is the most horrific display of basically a pathogenic attack upon specific countries in Africa and looking to be disseminated in other countries, and what's happening to the people without food, without water. So with no further ado, I'll turn it over to Dr. S. Go ahead, Doctor.
Oh, thanks very much, Steve. I really appreciate everyone joining us tonight, and I have had a tremendous wrestling with my spirit. Doug hit it there the first time. When I first came on, I really wanted to be informational. I wanted to sort of like present information that would help people and share with them, you know, what some of the limitations were of the medical system, what some of the limitations were due to the lethality of this virus, which is very lethal. And also to try to, you know, I mean, as physicians, we're very methodical. We think in a certain way, and so we try to make decisions based on evidence. It's called evidence-based medicine. And at the same time, we're citizens in our communities. We're fathers. We're brothers. We're husbands. And so, you know, I told Steve I saw what was going on, and I really just want you to know that tonight, from the bottom of my heart as a physician who's been training for 20 years, who deals in life and death situations, but is also interested in the events that are occurring in our country and around our nation, and then kind of looking at the catastrophes that we've faced over the last 5 years, 10 years, 50 years, 200 years. I mean, when you see the same signs, then you have to stop and say, okay, you know, I really feel like that I need to speak up. You know, one of the things that came out of all the disasters, the tornadoes, was the Torcon index, you know, the ability to predict the likelihood of a deadly tornado. And, you know, the one that was in Joplin was really formed quickly. It was on us in 5 minutes, and we really just didn't even have time to prepare. But we live in Tornado Alley all the time, so people might say, wow, you know, you had a warning. The earthquake that occurred this weekend in Napa Valley, the people, you may or may not know this, based on the seismic information, they had 10-second warning. Now, when hurricane was coming in, Hurricane Katrina, and wreaked such devastation, a lot of people say, I'm just going to stay here and ride it out, you know, and a lot of money and lives and agony occurred as a result of that. And so I told Steve, I said, I would like to sort of like talk to the audience in this way. I want to tell you what my agenda is, and I want to tell you what I see, and I want to tell you what I think that you should do. And if you do nothing, you can never say that you were not warned. But let me tell you something at the beginning of this. Although we're all individuals, we're connected to a lot of other people in our families. And decisions that the decision makers in your family or your businesses or whatever make will have a profound effect. And by that I mean whatever decisions that the dad or mom make will determine what the outcome is going to be with the children. Now, this is an interesting disease in the sense that it's highly contagious, and so we know that people who are dealing with it and who have dealt with it have even become sick. Let me say, you know, like Steve said, and many of you do not know this, and nothing I'm going to say is an opinion. Nothing I'm going to say is not already in the mainstream press. Nothing I'm going to say has not already been reported. But if you sit there and you rely on NBC, CBS, and ABC, you've got no clue about what's about to happen. Now, I hope that I'm wrong, but there is a saying, and it's what many of us live by. We have, as individuals in the United States, always been a resilient people because we've taken on personal responsibility. And if you fail to prepare, you will fail. I mean, the old saying is, failure to prepare is preparing to fail. It's true in this case. Because to me, looking at, I've been studying this, okay, what's the best way to go about this? I mean, here's the facts. You have the Ebola virus. We know there's different strains of it. There's no cure, there's no vaccine, and there's no treatment. And when they say supportive care, I mean, of the people that really have the disease and are symptomatic and having the fevers and the diarrhea and vomiting, very few of those people survive. But boy, they sure increase the likelihood of infecting people around them. And we may or may not have said this before, but I would urge you, I would beseech you, to go and get the movie Contagion. And even though it is a fictional movie, there's a lot of factors in that movie that show you things that happen, will happen, can happen. And so let me give you a factor. Just a couple of facts. Number one, we work in a healthcare system that, by and large, they wait till they're further along in their disease process before they seek medical attention. They oftentimes tend to use emergency rooms rather than scheduled appointments to get care, either because they can't afford a regular doctor or they don't have insurance, or they just put it off until they're really bad. And so the emergency rooms are for emergencies, but it's been well known for decades that it becomes a clinic for a lot of people. They use it, they get an acute treatment, they get whatever, if it's an upper respiratory infection or bladder infection, they get antibiotics. But every time they go there, whatever they've got on them, they're taking there to that place. And, on television, there's, in Contagion, there happens to be the World Health Organization, the CDC, that comes riding to the rescue. They figure it out. Sorry, folks, that's not going to happen here. So what I'm going to try to do is give you some information that will hopefully sober you up and get you to do something. And if you say, well, Doc, I don't have the money to do so-and-so, this is a great time of year to have a garage sale. If you've got to volunteer and put up signs to make extra money, cleaning up somebody's yard or moving somebody's kid into college, whatever you got to do, go make some extra money. There are some basic tenets of this that you must understand. Self-quarantine is going to be the best way to deal with this. When you have a virus that has no cure, and let me just make a quick point about ZMapp. It was made when these two people were discharged from Emory. It's been made, there was somebody who was given ZMapp in another country, and they died. The fact is, in reality, as the doctor said in Emory, we do not know whether the ZMapp helped this individual recover, it actually hurt their chances of recovery, or it had absolutely no difference in their recovery. But all the ZMapp doses are gone. As of this weekend, they're all gone. But one of the people that got it, the doctor, healthcare worker, died in another country. We had two people got it here. They were getting better. I don't know everything there is to know about this, but I would guess that these people were recovering, and they probably either did not get enough of the virus in their system, in other words, the amount of exposure, or the strain of Ebola they got, the lethality, the potential for death if you get it, the lethality they got of the strain may have been less, it may have been weakened. We learned this weekend, we've been very concerned about West Africa. There's a lot of things going on in the world. People are beginning to show up in other countries being tested. There was a lady that showed up from West Africa in Germany. She went to apply for a job. Boom, all of a sudden, guess what? 600 people are on quarantine. Doctors, first responders, ambulance people, and people that work in the office. It took them several days to go through and figure out who had exposure and who didn't. But if you take and you have an exposure in an emergency room, and then you go back and try to track down everybody, which is what epidemiology does, if you go down and try to track down everybody that might have had exposure or might have been in that emergency room, it's going to become a logistical nightmare. Fear is running rampant, and I'll tell you why. The WHO has already said, wow, there's a lot more people dead than the 1,426 because we know that families are hiding these individuals, whether they're sick or dead. And we know that I think Liberia actually passed a law that's illegal to harbor somebody, like that's going to make a difference. It's illegal to harbor somebody who has Ebola. So there is a limitation to how fast and how quickly we can respond. In the Joplin tornado, when we lost our medical facility, we had to send people across the street. That overwhelmed them. When we were sending people within about 300 miles. And the same thing has happened, in like Katrina and things like that. Katrina people were going to Houston. They were going to Dallas. They were going to Kansas City. And the people, just think about it for a second, and this is not said to criticize anybody, but to rethink how we're looking at this based on the lessons. There was a lot of people that were warned that decided to stay. They decided to stay for a variety of reasons. Many people say, well, we've ridden them out before. But when you purposely decide to do nothing and you just say, you know, I've been successful before, that's kind of like a Russian roulette. I mean, you don't know, and so you should do what's best for the people that you're in charge of, i.e. your family and your children. So our emergency rooms are oftentimes used as clinics. It's going to be a very high likelihood that people who maybe don't want to see a doctor, let's just say they come across the border. And we now know there's people from 60 or 70 countries coming across the border. Why? Because that's where you go. Why did Jesse James rob banks? Because that's where the money's at. Why do people go across the southern border from Afghanistan and Southeast Asia and Syria and places like that? Because it's easier. I mean, we have too long of stretch. I mean, Governor Perry's been trying to get the National Guard to seal it off. We also know that based on, this is not for me, based on testimony and also ex-CIA people, that people from ISIS have come into this country. High likelihood. Let's just say it that way. And let's say that since June, they've been threatening that they're going to attack a city in a major way. Well, I'm not going to say anything that has not already been said on the Internet. It's not already been said by people concerned. But obviously, if you have a virus that has no cure and it has a high degree of lethality, then you could infect somebody. I mean, if they're willing to strap a bomb on and go into some place and blow a bunch of people up, what would stop them on infecting somebody knowingly or unknowingly, and then they go about their life and they infect as many people as they can? Because remember, sweat, and now the CDC, since our last talk, has come out and confirmed that if you're within 3 feet of somebody, that you could catch it. That's called aerosolized. So you can't breathe the same air. So if you have these people coming across the borders in record numbers, if you have a virus that has almost a 80 to 90% death rate, now somebody might want to sit there and argue with me and say, well, there's 2,600, who are infected, there's 1,400 that are dead. Remember, there's large numbers of people that are dead that we're not even able to count. And that's from the World Health Organization, and that's from other countries. One of the things that's interesting this weekend is Liberia has a little town called West Point. They put 50,000 people together, quarantined them off, and held in guard by guards with full military gear. They use live rounds to keep these people pushed back. And, in fact, one boy who was 15 years old was shot and killed. And people, like there's a world-famous National Geographic photographer who's been in there, who's given a report recently, I think his name's John Moore. He just said they've got people who are infected next to people who are not infected. And he said it's just absolutely astonishing, because if you take a person and put them around all these people that are not infected, they're going to get infected. And so we used the number last time is exponential algorithmic or exponential growth, and basically it's not going to take very many people who could show up, I predict will show up as testing positive for the Ebola virus to then, can you imagine what kind of chain reaction that's going to set off? The people who worked in the ER, their friends, so-and-so works in the ER. Well, we need not have anything to do with them. Now, pray tell none of those people die, because they might get their houses burned down. Because do you know how they're disposing of the bodies in the countries where they're dying? They're so infected, they're so lethal, that despite positive protective equipment, some of the healthcare workers are still catching it. And if you've not on the drug report and you've not looked at pictures, these people are all garbed up. How many of you, since our last talk, has gone out, gotten some water, gotten some food, and ordered any personal protection, a level 4 sort of decontamination type situation? Probably very few of you. I know a few of you have. And I'll speak to that a little bit later on. Again, I'm not here. I have nothing to gain. I'm not getting paid to do this. I have a passion to do this, as Steve does. Steve's book breathe no evil comes as a result of massive amounts of research and putting 2 and 2 together and getting 4. Now, I really would urge you to order his book and to read it, because you need to understand this is not going to be the last time we are going to be facing this. You know, everybody, many of you may or may not remember when Saddam Hussein, he gassed the Kurds. In World War II, the Germans gassed our allies. So using germ and biological and chemical warfare is not new. And so, I mean, it's really sad. But the cavalry, the American military, put it in the blankets. They put smallpox in the blankets of the Native Americans who were moved on the Trail of Tears. Now, I'm from Oklahoma, so I have a tremendous amount of respect for our Native Americans and our minorities. And, you know, those people, they were forced to move, and smallpox, it was a form of genocide. It was a form of reducing the numbers of people because they were a burden on the system. And I'm going to ask you to just think for a second, wow, what if we kind of have the same thing going on here? What if there's an agenda? Well, what really kind of got me going, and I talked to Steve about this, is, and he was kind of, I mean, he knows stuff he can't say, but he was like, well, you're on to something, or that is interesting, I guess is what he said. One of the people that was on the flight that was shot down over the Ukraine or Russia on a Malaysian flight was a top Ebola scientist who has a genetically modified form of Ebola. And he was working at the Kinema lab. And what are the odds of that guy being on that plane when he gets blown out of the sky? I mean, it's possible. But if you put in the context that this outbreak occurred, do you know when this outbreak really started occurring? And I began to dig. I began to get very upset. Now, as a physician, I'm constantly scrutinized by my colleagues, by the quality committees in our hospitals about, you know, what we did and what happened and if something went wrong. Well, you actually had the first cases of this Ebola outbreak that started in December of 2013. Some cases in January and February. In March, when more cases showed up, people began to raise their flag. Those countries, Sierra Leone, Guinea, and Liberia, in the Ivory Coast area, they began to wave the flag, hey, we got a problem here. We even had Samaritans First. We had Doctors Without Borders. We had people saying, we've got a problem. No response from the World Health Organization. No response from the CDC. And on the same day that Mr. Isaac and Dr. Glover testified on August the 6th, you can go back and look for it yourself, very informational. I mean, I like to take information from people, not opinions, but people who have they're not gaming the system, they're not twisting what they're saying, they're not making it sound better or worse. So I told Steve, I said, I felt like that maybe in my mind, because I'm not, you know, sort of like, you know, we all, as physicians, we're not fear mongers. We're factual people, we're analytical, and we're always looking for training. Well, when you start looking at this becomes very disturbing. It's like here people are dying. Now, you know, when people were dying in Katrina, and people were dying in Joplin, and people were dying in New Jersey hurricane, and people are, you know, it really begins to set people off, because if you had warning that something was going to happen and you were slow to respond, I do have to say, I admire the World Health Organization for at least now having the truthfulness to come out and say, this outbreak is out of control, and we missed it, and it's much bigger and much worse, and there's going to be many more people die than we can even imagine. And many of you may or may not know, or many of you don't know, that the best estimate of when this could get under control and we don't have to worry about it growing is 9 months. Next summer, when your kids get out of school, is about the time that we're going to say we've kind of got a handle on this. But as of now, the numbers of death are growing. We know that the people who are dying are being hidden. We know that countries are cutting off their borders and their transportation and their flights to these countries. The world is becoming locked down. It's a form of governmental quarantine. And so if the governments are doing this and they're quietly doing this and they recognize what the risk is, then, why are you not? And I realize there's people listening from Canada, the Philippines, Europe. There's millions of people on this call tonight. Take notes. The things that I say, I want you to write down and begin to do some of your own research. But please do something and prepare your family. And, I understand there's a lot of stuff going on in other parts of the world and other issues. But Steve and Doug, one of the things that bothers me is we have ISIS, who they say is so horrible. They're the most sort of like demonic people and they make Al-Qaeda, they said, look like Boy Scouts. I mean, these people have 12-year-old kids beheading a 3-star general in Iraq. They're posting all over the internet all these beheadings and all this kind of stuff. They're after the Christians. They're after different groups. But now, even the countries that allowed them to grow and knew about them, which included Syria, which included Iraq, which included the United States, now, all of a sudden, these guys, they've become so arrogant, they're going to take it to you. And really what's really scary is, to Steve's point about why that so many people are coming across the border, and at a time when we're considering amnesty or we're considering letting all those people stay. I'm looking at this situation in Ferguson. You got all these young black males that can't find a job, and yet we're going to allow a bunch of people into the country to take the jobs that these people in America live. I think that I think some of the minority leaders are really speaking out against that. Now they're probably, it's not politically correct, so they're not going to have much of a voice, except on places, like Hagmann and places like that. But there are people trying to raise that consciousness. As a physician,
Doctor, Doctor, let me interject something here. I think that Absolutely. With all this stuff, and please, this is critical and germane to your issue. I think number one, let me run through 5 things because it will basically amplify what you're saying, but put it into perspective. I don't think the right perspective is given yet, and not by you, but I'm just saying the mainstream media won't get it. But let's face it. Let's just take my point I was going to say. The lackadaisical approach to tracking and locating the people who have been exposed to different flights and everything. We all know the NSA capabilities. Good night. After Snowden has blown the whistle, my guess is, and I'm just guessing this, 75% of those people have cell phones. All you got to do is match the cell phone number to the passenger list of whatever forms of transportation they were taking. So when I hear the lackadaisical approach, either from MI5, MI6, British Secret Service, and the CIA. I mean, let's face it, the NSA can track those people in real time, okay?
Right.
But here's the deal. The open borders not being closed, that's one, we'll call this a 5 red alert. First red alert. And then no realistic immediate isolation and quarantine. Second red alert. And I'm talking about, if we were charging bulls, we'd have so many directions to be able to go because they're waving the red capes. Let's go number 3. Lack of availability of BSL-4 equipment. You and I both know that Ebola has to be contained, and you have to approach it with positive pressure suits. You know what? I believe the CDC responded to our last talk when they said, we find no need for BSL-4. Okay, then let's just take everybody that works at the CDC and put them into a situation that is equal to what they're facing after. I guarantee you'll have no takers. In other words, you must have isolation tents. And number 4, by the lies concerning the screening time. We've heard that the screening time and the screening tests aren't really 100%. That's baloney. First of all, when any biological weapon is designed, they also have the antidote. For the years since Ebola first broke out, that is probably one of the most, I would say, sought-after bioweapons. It's been tweaked, and obviously vaccines have been developed. But when I hear that it takes 30 hours or 3 days, that's baloney. The military has almost near simultaneous equipment that can read out Ebola different strains. Someone says, how do you know that? I've been told that. So,
and I want to add one more thing to that because I'm gonna put a little different spin on that in the sense that if it does take 30 hours, and I can tell you why here in a minute, that's a bad sign. Because if you could determine it immediately, that would be a good sign, Steve. The fact that you can't, in many cases, that's a bad sign, and I'll tell you about that why in a minute. But go ahead and finish there.
Well, again, what I'm talking about is this, the fact that it's almost like there was denial. You just drew the timetable out from the time that it should have been a problem, and they claim they missed it. I would say look at the resignations, ladies and gentlemen, of the heads of the CDC, and at that point the heads of it, and look at all of the, how would I say, cover talk. Cover talk is another word for sanctified baloney that is basically set apart by the media handlers to throw people off, okay? And I'm being very nice in that statement. So what we've got here, and this is what I've got, we've got an intentional release, first and foremost, of a bioweapon. It's being, how should I say this, used against the people in Africa first and foremost. Second of all, every known protocol of dealing with these type of pathogens as Ebola, every single protocol has been avoided or violated. Third of all is that now we've got the open borders and we've got the open statements. Now, here's the thing. Remember, never let a good crisis go to waste. That was the statement, and that's what I believe we're seeing. So I want to go on record. This did not happen by chance. And by the way, after you and I did our show last time, I said, and I wouldn't be surprised to see it break into the animal sphere. Well, now we've got the price of pork going through the roof. We've got the porcine virus that's affecting the piglets, and we've also got hoof and mouth disease. So I think that people had better understand that, and believe it or not, I actually saw a post on a bulletin board somebody sent me. People said, well, I don't know where these guys talking, get the idea that there's actual people that want to kill 9/10 the human race. Well, how about the Georgia Guidestones? How about Prince Philip, that he'd like to come back as a virus? I suggest he may already be one. The point is that, and that's cynicism, the point is that there are over, I think someone actually documented, there are in excess of 700 or 800 quotes by the most powerful scientific minds in the world. And you know what at the core of this stuff is a hatred for mankind. So when you as a physician come on and you're taught to do no harm, your business, your calling in the living God is to save lives. My calling is to warn and save lives. Doug is doing everything he can. Joe is to have the broadest platform worldwide to shout from the housetops. And we still see this, I would call this total ineptness, and I don't believe it's ineptness. I believe it is a design parameter to basically maximize the rate of infectivity and to monitor it in lieu of in the time, what's the word I want, to substitute the time that they're going to basically, or buy some time that they're going to release. Now, deal with Ebola, the true Marburg, the true Zaire in Sudan, you mentioned it. We now have, for the first time that I know of, the two most lethal strains being announced, do we not? 1,000 miles away?
Right, Zaire and the Sudanese. And the Zaire is the one that's heavily lethal. And what's really weird is two of the people that died in the Congo in the last 2 days, they said one died of the Zaire strain and the other one died of what appears to be a mixed strain. So we see some very strange things going on here. You know, your perspective, I just want to back you up here a second, Steve. Okay, if people are like sitting here wrestling with Steve, go back to, pull up on your internet, go back to YouTube and pull up Paul Harvey, 1965. And it says, if I were, how did he say it? If I were, Paul Harvey, 1965.
We play that clip all the time, Doctor. If I were the devil.
But my point is that Paul Harvey, I mean, you know, a very trusted person who said, you know, if I were the devil. And he talked about actually some of the things that Steve just talked about. One of the things that is really problematic here is a strep test is a bacterial infection. They can determine with a relatively high certainty of whether or not you have strep. But if it's too early, it might be a false negative. Now, one of the things I've discovered in research is they have to have 3 negative blood tests, okay? That automatically ties you up. And here's why. Real quickly, when the virus first infects somebody, the virus is what we call an antigen, okay? The antigen then triggers an antibody response to the infection. And the first one is what we call an IgG, which is an immediate type antibody formation. And the second one is called an IgM, which is a long-term antibody. You can be infective if you're positive antigen and you're positive IgG. If you're negative antigen and you're negative IgG and positive IgM, that means long-term immunity. So if somebody's had the measles or whatever in the past, they're going to be positive IgM. Now, you don't have to remember all that. Here's my point, is that it takes a period of time to see what the antibodies are doing to just try to figure out if this person is likely infected. So it's not like you can draw a blood test and say, oh, the potassium level is such and such. So when you start dealing with these infections that are very lethal, and by the way, one point to your thing here, Steve, the people, as my understanding, were wearing protective gear. Dr. Brantley and the other lady, they were wearing protective gear. So we already know that physicians who are very well trained, board certified, we know that just from them touching the patients, examining the patients, they've gone home and their whole family's died. The patients that they've examined that afternoon in the clinic have died. And I know I'm trying to put fear in people because one of the things they ask us to do is, to use foam and to use pure gel and all that kind of stuff before we go in to see the patient and when we come out. We're constantly washing our hands. We don't even know, as physicians, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but we don't even know if that will be enough to even kill the virus. So I'm gonna say something, and Steve brought it up, and people may not know what this means, but the positive pressure suits means that when you have a gas mask on, many of them fit really tight. They're negative pressure. But a positive pressure, what it does is it blows air into your mask, and then the air slips out around your neck. Now, that's a very specific type of gas mask. So just buying any gas mask won't necessarily work. And the second thing is you have to have a biohazard level 4 suit, and you'd like to get one that's reusable. It's a type X, type F, and then you have to get decontaminated because every time you're exposed. So again, let's go back. Once you get past this whole thing about preparation, if you have to go out in the environment, you're not going to be able to know who's got it and who doesn't. Because again, we said 21-day incubation period. It can survive on a surface for 7 to 14 days. So if you can't see it and you don't know it, the best thing to do is hunker down. And the only way you can hunker down is if you've got the food, the water, and your necessary medication. Now, one of the things that we brought out last time, and I'd like to drive this point home, so don't mean to be gross, but there's been studies done where they swab the handle of the shopping cart at the different large chain grocery stores and like Sam's, Costco, Home Depot. 90% of those handles had E. coli that tends to come out of your colon, out of your rectum, and stool. Now, there's nobody that's yet come out with a method of spraying those down, so when you grab that, wherever you grab that, you don't know if you're protected or not. Will there come a time when you have to wear a mask and you have to wear gloves to go shop at the grocery store? Will you have to spray your stuff down? What would you use? Would you use Lysol? We don't even know what will kill it and what not kill it. So Steve and I are really trying to get you to stop and think. We need a plan. I have a friend, and he lives in the Midwest, and I called him and I said, and I won't call his name, but I said, I just want to say goodbye. And he said, what's that? I said, I just want to say goodbye. I said, if we go into a situation where the only way of our nation handling this virus, an outbreak, whether you agree with it or not, is a complete quarantine where you got a 9/11, but you don't just ground the flights, you don't just ground the trains, but you ground the trucks, the UPS, the FedEx, the trucks that deliver food to the grocery stores. You look at any ice storm, you look at any hurricane, you look at the recent disaster they had with the food from the water supply, and you couldn't even drink the water when you boiled it in Toledo, Ohio. You had to go 56 miles to get a bottle of water. Now, do you think that if you're in the middle of a crisis and the law enforcement is on heightened alert, there's going to be a lot of things they're going to have to drop? Somehow people think that police can protect you. They can't. They can help you. They're there for the betterment of the community. But Supreme Court law, they've been tried numerous times. and they do not have a responsibility to protect you individually. That may come as a shock to Americans and people around the world, that you are responsible for your own personal protection, which also means providing for your family. So, but the point is that if we started having some outbreaks, how long do you think there would be any food or water on the shelves? And so what I'm trying to get you is to think about, my buddy said, oh, wow, I began to think about that. I began to play that out of my mind with me and my kids. So him and his wife is married. There's 6 of them. The minimum amount of water, now we're not talking bathing, so imagine in August and September and it's hot and you're not bathing, but the minimum amount of water is 2 gallons per person per day. So 2 gallons per person is 12 gallons for his family a day just to drink, just to survive. And so for 7 days, that's going to be about, 7 times 6 is going to be about 42 gallons. And then if they say, well, there's going to be about 6 weeks, so you basically 40. If you have 6 people times 2, that's 12 gallons per day. 12 times 7 is 108 gallons a week. 108 gallons a week times 7 weeks is 700 gallons of water. I'm just rounding it off. For a family of 4 kids and a husband and wife, do you have 700 gallons of water that if they lock the airports down and the delivery systems? Because what I'm saying is that if you don't begin to get this stuff lined up, you are going to become part of the problem and not the answer or the solution. Steve and I, and Doug and his program, are trying to equip you with information, knowledge, and facts. We've spent hundreds of hours pulling this together for you. You're sitting back there in your chair. I hope you go and listen to this. It'll be posted on YouTube probably tomorrow. Go back and listen to our first program. I beg you to go listen to Ed Isaac's testimony to the subcommittee on the Ebola outbreak, because he and Dr. Glover had been on the ground, had seen all the horrendous deaths. This thing is growing. The number of countries that are either having new cases, like Congo, they say, well, maybe it's a hemorrhagic typhoid which can behave like this. No, it turned out to be Ebola, and so that's not even contiguous. That's almost 1,000 miles from these other 3 countries. Philippines are pulling all their soldiers out. They said if this hits the Philippines, it'll wipe us out. Our emergency rooms are not equipped to handle a number of people who are coming to get screened. And if you do, think about the ramifications for your entire family. Think about your job. You think they're going to want you back at your job? And, the other thing, too, is like Steve was mentioning, and I'll just say this, and in all honesty, for various reasons, we sometimes have a national shortage of drugs. Sometimes it might be IV Zofran, intravenous Zofran we use when you're puking your guts up and we keep you from vomiting. It may be IV morphine. It may be even nitroglycerin. Yeah, that's right. I mean, we actually have shortages of certain kinds of antibiotics. We have certain shortages of different things. They've asked us to cut back on different times, and those shortages may last 6 months. Now, we as the physicians don't go out and advertise all this, but you just need to know what the facts are. You're relying solely on a healthcare system that for 100% lethal disease, by that I mean if you get a high viral load, there's really nothing anybody can do. And then if you have it, what do you think the likelihood of infecting your whole family is? It's high. If your family dies, how are they going to bury you? I mean, one of the things about contagion that Matt Damon tried to do, he tried to bury his wife, and he said, no, you can't do that. You go to look at the television, and they got mass graves in other countries. They've got people, they're spraying them down and then burning them. Now, that may sound gross, but this is the real world. And in the real world, when you're dealing with something that's highly contagious, what you're trying to do is take an action that prevents it from spreading and minimizes the chances of it becoming so uncontrolled that it wipes out. And like Steve said, there are people that have an agenda that would like to see the world population go down, to quit using so many resources, and that's the reality and facts. Whether or not you agree with it or not doesn't matter. Those are the facts. And Steve and a lot of other people have a lot of information to prove that. But just think about something that's so fatal, and it's only until like July, August, that we have the World Health Organization and the CDC saying this is an emergency, this is an outbreak, and then they say, oh, it's already out of control. Well, if our officials who are national and internationally responsible for our health care, and there's been people that have been warning, hey, we got a problem, we got a problem, we got a problem. And in fact, that is one of the very biggest frustrations I saw in Mr. Isaac's voice and his face, listening to him in his voice and watching his face, is the frustration that for weeks there have been numerous people telling them this is going to be a horrendous outbreak, and it's occurring, and nobody's doing anything about it. And at the same time, Liberia had, I think it was Liberia, they didn't have any gloves. Nigeria's got a 2-month doctor strike going on. And do you think that nurses and nurse aides, doctors, physicians' assistants, people who work in X-ray, do you think those people are going to go to work and be there to wait on you if we have something that then it starts showing up in your city, in your emergency rooms? I mean, we do not have, I'm telling you, never in the history of my 20 years of being from L.A. County to other cities, to Joplin, to wherever, talking to my friends, we do not have, nor have I ever seen, anybody in a level 4 decontamination suit. And I'm not sure that most would even know how to put all of it on and then take it off without getting infected. And, I asked Steve about this, and this is not a plug, but I did have some people go, okay, Doc, you're telling us to get food and water. We get that. But like this nut, so we're going wasting our money, who can we talk to that knows what to give us or sell us at a reasonable price and that we can use again and again? And he's a very good friend of Steve's. And Steve, is it okay to mention him? And again, I don't have any, I'm not trying to promote him, but it's who I got my stuff from. Ready Made Resources, Mr. Robert Griswold, Ready Made Resources. He's been doing this for 20 years. And he, like Steve, has a passion to save lives, to prevent suffering. And he's ready and able to help you. Now, guess what? Some of those positive pressure gas masks are becoming in short supply. Those come from Israel. They're being attacked by Gaza, by the Hamas. So whether or not they're holding more of those masks back for their own population they're worried about, I don't know. But, Steve is a very clear voice, and I realize that in this day and time, people may form opinions about, is this really that serious or what? I'm telling you, as a physician, being doing this for 20 years, I've told my kids, I said, this could come to my town, this could come to our city, and if it does, we're going to hunker down, and we're going to be a self-quarantine. And wherever you're at, then that's what you're going to need to do. And we may have 6 hours of notice. We may have no notice. We may have 1 day. But if you don't already have your stuff and it happens, you're too late. So you better be every day doing something. And even if you don't have money, you can, there's Clorox wipes, Lysol, keep your backpacks and keep your purses on the floor. Don't put them on your counters. Don't put boxes on the counters that have been on the floor. Frequent hand washing. You need Purell. You need Purell in your car before you go and get out and go to the store. When you come back, when you handle things, because it can be transmitted by hand. I was just on a flight this weekend, and I went through Atlanta, and I looked around at all the hundreds, the thousands of people that were coming and going, and you think about our public, places, and now we're having all these pro and college football games. If somebody, and Steve and I have information that there is intent to use this virus in a negative way, in a terroristic fashion, okay, I said it. We do know there are people who have an intent of having a terrorist attack, and one of the methods that's being discussed is Ebola. Now,
I can second that.
Senator Jeff Sessions and Senator Jim Imhoff, one from Mississippi, one from Alabama, Imhoff from Oklahoma. They just said today that ISIS is a terroristic group that's planning on hitting the United States. You heard it. Now, if I'm telling you that they can tie up a lot of healthcare personnel by just being exposed and then having to figure out if they're infected or not, and then they're going into quarantine, you can take out a large number of people. Now, I'm pleading with you tonight to get on the same wavelength. Take notes, listen to what Steve and I are talking about, because some of this stuff may go so fast. But as Paul Harvey said in 1965, if I were the devil, one of the things he talked about was I would come back with germ warfare. We have germ warfare with Saddam. We have germ warfare with the Germans. This is nothing new. You may not have ever seen it or heard about it. It doesn't mean that it's not on the tip of people's tongues. And since I am a physician and I have a passion for this, because I'm prepping and taking care of my family, and I said, if I do not do my job as a father, it will mean that your chances of surviving are almost zero. What you do, parents, and don't look to some city or group or everybody's out of money. You're going to have to make some tough choices here. You need to leave off the lattes. You need to quit shopping. You need to start spending on money and food. And you know what? Most of this stuff, especially with the Berkey water filtration system, most of this stuff, you can filter water that you've had for 5 or 10 years. And, places, there are places that sell the chlorine dioxide or Purigine to be able to preserve your water for 5 years, pour it back to Berkey water filtration system. It's basically just it's like 2 iced tea stainless steel containers. One sits on top of the other. It has these special filters. It filters out 99 point. There's 7 nines there. I'll just forget the nines, So Steve has got the intellectual information in Breathe No Evil. I urge you to buy that book. I urge you to read that book. Information is knowledge. Stupidity is having knowledge and doing nothing with it. Wisdom is having knowledge and applying it and being proactive. And one of the things I've told my kids, if I call you and I've got a code name, it's a level 5 alert, that means that you get in your car and you drive home, you don't stop, and you don't tell a soul, because you can start off you can trigger mass hysteria. But I said, I will not call you unless I have a good idea that it's out there. And so what I'm going to ask you to do is, if the Congo is admitting, they didn't even want to admit that this was until they had it confirmed. You had a British citizen who was flown home on a special. This is one of the things Mr. Isaac made. There's only a handful of these pressurized special beds that you could transport an infected or potentially infected Ebola patient on. The person who died in Ireland, it was negative. The person who was tested in Sacramento last week, it was negative. In New Mexico, it was negative. But like Steve said, if our enemies, if the terrorists are overrunning the borders, people, get on the phone and talk to your congresspeople and your senators. And you say, well, it won't do any good. If they get 10,000 phone calls a day and you tell them, I'm going to lead the way to get you out of office come November, they might respond. And this is not about Democrat, Republican. This is not against the president. He may, in his mind, believe that, sort of amnesty or just signing an executive order and letting these people. But did you realize that we're going to put tens of thousands of people, many of them who are terrorists, many of them who are already here, and a lot of them they're Americans or they're British and they have passports? I mean, Steve, I tell you what, the healthcare system is not designed or equipped or can handle even a mild pandemic. If the healthcare system cannot even handle a hurricane or a tornado, what makes you think it's going to be able to have the capability of quarantine, testing? If you've got it, well, then everybody you've come in contact with, now they've got to be on quarantine, and then it just grows. It's a ripple effect. And that's what we saw in that movie, Contagion. And we went back at the very end, they saw that a bat had some food, dropped it on the floor, the pig ate it, and now we know, check this out, everybody. Now we know that Ebola can cross from a pig to a monkey or a monkey to a pig. So in that movie, basically the pig was taken to the market, was taken to the restaurant. The chef prepared the pig. Very nice gentleman, shook hands with Gwyneth Paltrow. Sorry, I'm telling you the movie. You just got to make the point. She started getting sick. One of her children caught it. Little boy died. Matt Damon took his wife because she had a seizure and she died. When they did her autopsy, they couldn't even believe it. He's going, well, how could this happen? It's not going to matter how it can happen. It's not going to matter your opinion about it. I'm on here with Steve tonight to beg you to do the things that need to be done. And it's not just one simple, easy fix. I mean, for every day that goes by that we don't have this, you need to be ordering the information. And you need to order it from people who know what they're talking about. They need to be knowledgeable of it. There is a substance. It's not EPA approved, but it is EPA registered. It's called Hazarid, Hazarid, that Ready Made Resources has access to, as well as other places, that you can basically mix it up in a concentrate. You can spray it in your vehicle or wherever, and you could decontaminate a whole locker room in 5 minutes. And some of these things, remember, you're buying things that are going to last. If there's no medication, people, we're not talking about strep throat. We're not talking about a urinary tract infection where I can give you a prescription. And I want everybody to just take a deep breath and listen to what I'm going to say really carefully. And because you think, well, because things are going on in a third world country, they wouldn't go on here. No, when you overwhelm the healthcare system, what happens there and here. So now, as a result of the overwhelming burden of this, in Liberia, I believe it is, or at least in some of the cities there, all non-Ebola care is totally ignored. And what do I mean by that? If you don't have Ebola, you don't get any care. There are women delivering babies by themselves. If you have a car wreck and you have broken bones, you can't go to the emergency room because they won't let you in. If you have a broken bone, there very well may not be a doctor who has the clearance to be able to give you an operation. I've seen times when a area got in MRSA, methicillin-resistant Staph aureus, is not responsive to any antibiotics. I saw the time when they had to go in and close down an entire coronary care unit and decontaminate it. And so if you need the intensive care unit setting with the ability to have the proper mask and gowns, I don't think our hospital system, I don't think our healthcare system has the money to be able to go buy, even if they wanted to. Where would they buy it from? How would they know that it really works? How do they know what kind of guidelines? I mean, we have disaster drills for fires, for earthquakes, for hurricanes, and for tornadoes. We don't have them for Ebola outbreaks. So if you have a situation where the healthcare system around the world, that if non-Ebola care is needed, so you have appendicitis, your wife has a gallbladder attack, your wife has a bad bladder infection, your wife, somebody falls and has a broken leg, they have a slipped disc, they're in a motor vehicle accident, and there's nobody available to take care of them, what are you going to do? You are in trouble. We are in trouble. We're in trouble as a people. We're in trouble as a nation. So right now, to me, it's going to be critical that we seal off our borders, which I don't think is probably going to happen. And the people who, I'm all for immigrants to coming to this country, but we got to do it the right way. We got to control things. And, South Africa and a lot of other African countries have closed their borders. They will only let you in on a case-by-case basis. If you're from West Africa, forget it. You're not getting in there. And that is beginning to occur in other nations. So it's what countries are having to do. Now, if the country's doing on an international level, why would we not do that on a citywide level? There's hospitals. Most hospitals, there's two types. There's the primary, rural community hospital. There's a high-end tertiary care facility that is able to take care of level 1 trauma. They have the best of the best of the best. People, there is over a 65,000 doctor shortage in America. On top of the doctor shortage, there's times when the hospital has the bed, they don't have a nurse that can work They don't have a nurse that can work the shift to take care because there's a nursing shortage. And so if you tell, I'm just going to tell you, human nature is human nature. What's different about a doctor in Zaire taking his family and saying, I'm not going to go up there and risk my life and bring it home to my family to take care of these patients that may be infected with Ebola? And I realize we need to take a break here, but we do. I just really want to drive this home about non-Ebola care will become non-existent, and you're going to be on your own. What are you going to do then? So, Doug, you want to take a break?
Yeah, and I just, ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to Mr. Steve Quayle from stevequayle.com, along with Dr. S. M.D. We know him, of course. We know who he is, and we're just protecting his name from the public. But I'll tell you what, this is a very informative show. Mr. Steve Quayle, 20 years ahead of his time with Breathe No Evil. If you haven't ordered that book yet for your library, for your use, I want to let everyone know. I know the doctor and, of course, Steve, they were talking about different places to purchase items to prevent, as a preventive measure, survival products against Ebola, against airborne viruses, and what have you. Folks, our partners in this radio endeavor, American Survival Wholesale, have got the NATO military-grade gear that includes a respirator mask as well as the reusable suit for, believe this, under $200. I got to tell you, folks, go to AmericanSurvivalWholesale.com. Under Shop Survival Products, just click on New Products or Products in general, and you'll find the NATO military NBC, NATO-grade military-grade NBC suit, or just type in the search box NBC. It'll come up, folks. This is a must-have right now. And like the doctor said, these things are getting very hard to get. So I would urge everyone after the show, during the show, right now, AmericanSurvivalWholesale.com, click on the put NBC in the search box, come up with the NBC suits. And this is not fear-mongering. This is just reality, folks. Get them while you still can, and order them from, of course, your choice. But we prefer American Survival Wholesale. It's a Christian-owned, veteran-owned company. That's AmericanSurvivalWholesale.com. Under $200 for NBC suits. God bless.
You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth. You can't handle the truth.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to hour number 2 of this Monday edition of the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. We are joined by Dr. S. and Steve Quayle from stevequayle.com. We are talking about Ebola, the threat it poses. And I'm going to turn it back over to you, Steve, and you set the tone here for the second hour.
Well, thank you, and I hope everybody is taking notes, and I'd re-listen to this. I think one of the things that I've got to lay out tonight, as Dr. S. is telling you the situation in the medical community, here's what most people are losing in the whole understanding of this. I'm going to read some of the population control quotes which show that truly the elite believe that humans are a plague upon the earth and that a great culling is necessary. Now, let me share this. To the elite, they do not believe that they are of the same origin. They do not believe that they are created by the living God. They believe in a different God. And let me give you some quotes on this, and I think you'll understand. Sir David Attenborough, and he was a British television presenter. Many of you have seen him. But here's what he says, quote, "We are a plague on the earth. It's coming home to roost over the next 50 years or so. It's not just climate change. It's sheer space, places to grow food for this enormous horde. Either we limit our population growth or the natural world will do it for us. And the natural world is doing it for us right now." Most people don't know this, but almost 4 years ago, Hillary Clinton on her population control said, now you're going to love this, population control will now become the centerpiece of U.S. foreign policy. Now, ladies and gentlemen, Doug's done a wonderful job on Benghazi and the other issues, but what most people don't know is that when they propose killing off almost 6 billion people, and even 500 million people alive. That means all of us, and that means we all die and they live. Now, again, I'm speaking for myself on this, but the point being, when Prince Philip, the husband of Queen Elizabeth II and co-founder of the World Wildlife Fund, interesting, notice this, in the event that I am reincarnated, I would like to return as a deadly virus in order to contribute something to solve overpopulation. How about Ted Turner? I live in Montana. Ted Turner owns one of the largest ranches in the country. It's in Montana. It's the old King Ranch, and then it was called the Flying D, and now it's called Turner Ranches. But he actually gave a prize. I don't know if you know this, Doc, to the person that could kill off 90% of the world's population the most humanely. Now, does that sound like someone who loves mankind? And it's a total world population of 250 to 300 million people. A 95% decline from present levels would be ideal. Now, how about this? Yeah, let me just go a couple more. We humans have become a disease, the human pox. Paul Ehrlich, nobody in my view has a right to have 12 children or even 3 unless a second pregnancy is twins. Then let's go to one of the most amazing things is David Rockefeller, obviously. The negative impact of population growth on all of our planetary ecosystems is becoming appallingly evident. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, these people want you dead. Jacques Cousteau, in order to stabilize world population, we must eliminate 350,000 people per day. It is a horrible thing to say, but it's just as bad not to say it. And I love this one. I don't know that he lived up to it. Finnish from Finland, environmentalist Petty Linkola. If there were a button I could press, I would sacrifice myself without hesitating if it meant millions of people would die. Well, obviously, he's not willing to sacrifice himself, but this is the point I want to bring up. We are at the point in history now where all of these 30 quotes, and by the way, I just put them up on stevequayle.com so people can go and see the original great article by Michael Snyder, and the Georgia Guidestones, which is interesting, patterned after Stonehenge, and we don't have time to talk about this. Here's the bottom line. We are basically seen as the enemy to the elite. The elite will use everything, and I used to, Doc, you and I didn't talk about this, but I used to write about nuclear war and all the basically the throwaways of different weapon systems, civil defense, the ramifications of a country, for instance, Soviet Union and China, which have massive civil defense versus ours, the United States, which doesn't. But 30 population control quotes that show that the elite truly believe that humans are a plague upon the earth. That sounds like Satan himself wrote this, because Jesus said the thief comes what? To rob, to kill, and to steal, and destroy. So that's where we're at, ladies and gentlemen. You can go and see it. And to anybody ignorant enough, and I'm sorry, to anybody ignorant enough to not hear what the doctor is saying about what normal medical care will be available, and all I hear, Doc, from nurses who are sending me emails now, throughout the week I get from nurses and MDs, is the tragedy that they're seeing played out in their own hospitals, in their own clinics, in their own practices. And I got to tell you, it doesn't surprise me how many physicians are leaving. And these are some of the kindest, most wonderful men and women physicians. They just said, Steve, we can't take it. Obamacare is a nightmare. Obamacare, in a nutshell, is nothing more than eugenics. Go ahead.
I agree with all of that. And as a Christian, and I tell people, I'm guided by my conscience, I'm guided by my soul, and I live by a Hippocratic oath to do no evil. Well, what I see happening is where a lot of people who rely on the healthcare officials or government officials, how many times do you have to fail the government? I mean, how many times does the government have to fail you before you figured out that maybe there's an agenda? And, it's what's going on. I just don't understand how so many people can say, well, let's let all these people in and let's give them free health care, and the people who are here, or either the working poor or just the middle class or whatever, they're paying 30, 40, 50% of the taxes, and the healthcare system, got to understand, everybody, that a pandemic or an influenza outbreak would be just a mild form. It will wipe out like 50% or 70% of a high school, and so they'll have to close the school down for a while. Well, if we get this going, there's no end. There's no way to stop it. Do you not understand that right now the death rate's climbing? They say the death rate's actually much worse than the 1426. We now have more countries getting it. We have the World Health Organization finally coming out and say this is an emergency, this is an urgency, we can't control it, we're worried about it, we have no drugs. And I don't know what people are relying on, but I look at it this, when at some point every person is going to stand before God. And when you do, there will not be a person who God is not going to say, when that epidemic hit and those people were suffering, what did you do? Did you send money to the people that are over there, like Samaritan's Purse and SIM? Did you send money knowing at least to the organizations that are trying to do something on the ground? Did you prepare your family? Did you buy food and water for an elderly couple that can't afford it? Did you maybe have the single mother who has 2 or 3 kids that's working 2 jobs? Did you help them? What did you do with your money? And I don't have any problem. People can spend the money they want to. What I'm trying to plead with you is help us get people ready, because our healthcare system, I don't care if it's in England, if it's in the United States, and Americans are so used to just basically, they just want to go be seen on demand. Well, every public place you sit, when I was sitting in an airport terminal this weekend, or you go to a sporting event, do you realize how easy that if somebody wants to make it, and it's really quite shocking that it has not already happened to a larger degree. And I think that Steve brought up some point that people may not understand. If you have a virus and it's characterized, well, then you can start working against it with a vaccine to prevent it. Anybody who gets it, it's too late. But if you take that virus and then you change it, and it's a different virus, different type, well, then that vaccine won't work. But let's say that the vaccine is created for a strain of Ebola, and that vaccine is available to a certain number of people, but to nobody else. It would literally like trying to get on the Titanic. And maybe the Titanic is a good example. When those people boarded that ship, they fully expected to reach New York. And everybody had such confidence, arrogance, confidence, that there's no way. I mean, they were told, this ship cannot be sunk. Now, how many times does that sound familiar? Our government officials, we've got it under control. We are studying it. You can study the road as you're going 100 miles an hour and try to make a curve that the sign says 30. I can tell you what's going to happen to you. You're going to go flying through the air and it's going to kill you. So, to me, that is where we are headed tonight. August 25th, you go back and listen to the show August the 8th. This is a red alert. This is a red alert. If nobody else is going to sound it, I'm going to sound it. I am the Paul Revere tonight. I am besieging you. I am beseeching you to search your mind, your conscience, to do something, to take Steve's work seriously. This is not half-net stuff. This is stuff from high intelligence sources, confidential. These are people that got a conscience, that didn't have one. People had deathbed confessions. I mean, he's not going to put something out there that's lies. And it's not fear-mongering to sell a book. Steve is far more worth that, and he's devoted his life, as Hagmann and Hagmann are, to tell people the truth. I mean, they helped break the story about, we literally had a president asking our generals, would you shoot on the American public if you need to? Really? That is so degrading and so anti what the military is about, and they're so appalled. But those people got fired. And there's been about 230-something get fired. So let's just look at the overall evidence from the 10,000-foot view. We have a worldwide epidemic that's killed twice as many people since we were able to join you before. Greatly appreciate the Hagmanns having us on again. I feel very strongly, very convicted that things are going to happen. I see things happening, and I'm sent to you as a messenger. And it's, all I can do is preach to you, teach to you what the numbers are, what the facts are, I'm not here to gain anything. I don't get anything. That's not my motivation. It's my calling. God has laid this on my conscience. If I do not deliver this, I am failing you, I'm failing my family, and I'm failing God. I tell my kids all the time, what's your life about? Is your life about other people? And character is when you can stand up and say the difficult things, the difficult things. And we're not here to make people out to be bad guys. This is much bigger than one person. This is much bigger than one group of people or one political party. This is big. But you need, besides to be preparing, you need to be looking after the needs of others. You cannot rely on your city organization, your neighborhood organization, or your church. But you know what you could do? You could buy a bunch of water and you could donate it and say, this is for people that want to buy water to stock up. You can direct some of that. And but tonight we have a virus that is now spreading to the Congo. We have the alarm going out with nations closing the borders. They're stopping to fly flights there. We have people 50,000. Can any of you in America tonight imagine being in a slum of 50,000 people, forced to sleep, breathe, and eat a few bowls of rice a day or a few cups of rice a day, and they're going to keep you in there. The military's going to keep you in there to keep you from possibly infecting anybody else. And, despite all the efforts, the very last place to have Ebola in Liberia got it over the weekend. And there's literally people, despite all the evidence, because of their lack of knowledge, they don't have a communication. There were people that didn't even believe Ebola was true. They thought it was just a government control thing. It's not. And we have the scientific proof. We have the scientists. There's a lot of silent majority out there positions. There's people that prepare with food, water, other means, who are doing what I'm doing. I've called my friends. I've sent emails. And I've said to you, this is so real, and we're level 3 to 4. Level 5 is when it's here. I'm going to say goodbye because I don't know if I'll ever get to talk to you again, because when this all goes down, it'll just be like on Contagion. It's every man for himself. It's going to be a free-for-all. You can help yourself, help your family, help your community, help the government, help our nation, help the world if you would start systematically focusing on every day for the next month and every day that something hasn't happened. But people, you now have CIA officials, you have senators saying that ISIS is going to do something. There's a very high likelihood that they're going to try to do something on a 9/11 scale. And I'm not here to say that our CIA, FBI, Homeland Security, they're not doing everything they can to prevent that. But, we have a responsibility. We can't sit back and rely on just our military to defend us. I mean, think about all the people that live in Israel every day. They get shot at. There's bombs. There's missiles. I'm just using that as an example of people who are living, and they're, they live a life of preparedness, but they're still even suffering. So we've not yet begun to suffer like we will, I believe. That's what I said. I feel like our nation is going to suffer, and when it happens, all the finger pointing, I just want to make it August the 25th, who has not got our borders secured? Who's letting all these people in? What's the motivation? What's the agenda? With unemployment, people can't get jobs. With our minorities, especially the minority males, young people can't get a job.
And there it is.
You're going to bring all these other people in here, and you're going to let them go after the same jobs, and then they're bringing TB. We already see it in the Border Patrols. And do you think the healthcare workers and their families are going to let the doctors, nurses, and everybody go back to work? Who's going to take care of you if you have a broken hip or heart attack? I mean, who's going to put your stent in? I mean, we may all be shut out of the hospital. Hospital may go to a divert mode and say, nope, we're full, can't take anybody. So it does happen. I mean, they run out of beds. And if you don't have people that show up for work, there's only so many people they can take. And I'm telling you, I see it coming. We have diverts all the time.
If I can ask you a question, Doctor, and I asked you this last time, and I'm not sure exactly what the answer was, but to me, this is extremely important. If anyone listening to this program, and you know, the majority of people have radios and televisions, obviously, most people have televisions, but if you woke up tomorrow morning, and this is a really important question, I think, and you turn on the television, what specific news headline, soundbite, piece of information on the television by the muckety talking heads that are, you know, nothing more than just teleprompter readers, what piece of information, what headline, what statement would make you say, whoa, okay, now we have a real big problem, a huge problem here in the United States or in the UK or wherever that person is reporting from? What particular headline, what sentence or sentences specific would cause you to say, it's a new game?
The first American citizen in the United States that is tested positive for Ebola. The first person who is tested for Ebola, because I'll have no idea whether or not I ran across them in the airport. I'll have no idea. But if there's one, this is like just the numbers game. If you've got one, you've already got a bunch. And I don't care if it's snakes. I don't care if it's rats. I don't care if it's viruses. And we saw that with the AIDS virus and an epidemic. And we saw that how so many people were scorned. And we saw how people were, like, turned away. You don't think that same thing's not going to happen to you and your family? You don't think you're going to be scorned and you're going to be ignored? And I posed this problem to Steve, and I said, do you not think that people won't go burn other people's houses down, the neighbors, because they don't want that virus to get out? Now, you couple fear with the facts, and I guess that's one of the things that's really kind of eating on me, is I'm giving people facts, you know, and people's like, well, either they're dumb or let's wait and see. So you want to take a chance on the life of your children. You want to take a chance on your parents. You know, having this knowledge tonight and doing nothing is paramount to you saying that I don't really care what you're saying, doctor. I don't really care what the facts are. You know, I want to live my life. I want to go turn on National Geographic. I want to turn on the History Channel, the MTV. I want to be entertained. You know, and I'm trying to be Paul Revere tonight. I'm not trying to be dramatic. I'm not trying to create fear. But what I see is this problem is growing. And whether or not people know this or not, at least even these national and international figures are standing up and saying, we've got a crisis. The Ebola thing is a crisis. Why is it a crisis? You have a very lethal disease with no treatment, and the only way you can prevent it is quarantine, or the only way you can keep from contracting it is to prevent it. The only way you can prevent it is to not be out and about. Well, if you're not stocking up on food and water and supplies, and I'm glad you mentioned that other place where people can get the NBC, the level 4, decontamination equipment, and also there's some methods for, like, if you do have to go out, how to spray down. And there's, you know, me and Steve and Doug are trying to really tell you every source we can think of things to do. We're trying to give you the shortcut. I mean, all of us have put thousands of hours into this, even to the point where our families are looking at us going, really? No, we're saying, yeah. I mean, we're doing this on top of everything else in the world. And, I'm in the process of moving lately. I'm moving a house, and it's just been a nightmare. And I'm thinking, oh, my gosh, I got to get my water things refilled. I need to get the supplies ordered in here, and I'm waiting on them. I hope nothing happens and it gets hung up with the FedEx trucks. Do you not think that, as in the movie Contagion, that trucks that people thought there was food on, that those trucks weren't hijacked? Do you think those truck drivers are going to be driving that truck up to Sam's or to Costco or home, wherever the food's at? I tell you, it's a whole different world. when it's chaos, there's nobody coordinating anything. The closest thing we saw to it was the chaos with Katrina, and that is just one small city. I mean, small relative to 340 million.
Imagine that across the country. Imagine that.
Hey, Doug.
Doug, yeah, go ahead.
I want to throw something in here that's just came into me from one of my intercessors. Guinea receives Ebola diagnostic lab from Russia. Right, and this just happened, Doc, so this is interesting. Wow. An ultra-modern laboratory valued over $5 million with all necessary equipment comes not only in a sense to help in the fight against Ebola, but also effective response or request for help formulated by the government of Guinea. Now, listen to this. According to the Russian head of immunological and virological laboratories, Alexander Semenov, in addition to the equipment of the latest generation, we are a group of a dozen Russian scientists who have come to work in Guinea to stop the chain quickly spread of the virus and see extent available locally a vaccine against the disease. This means that we are at heart with our brothers. So what I see here right now is interesting. We're sending what we're doing to do, and we're sending what we do. But Russia is sending the head of their immunological and virological laboratory, Alexander Semenov. I'll be posting this in a minute. What would happen, I'm throwing this out, what would happen if the top Russian scientists said we have found if you will, missing link to this, and this is a bioweapon. Now, I'm just throwing this out. It's my contention that there's a bigger picture here, and I got to tell you something. Anybody, I don't know who Dr. Semenov is, but I'd shake his hand. I truly would, because here's a guy saying, "Look, we're 12 of the best," and I'm pretty familiar with Russian biological weapons development and chemical weapon development. Believe it or not, even and the intelligence agencies didn't know about a certain combination weapon, chemical weapon, and then when I blew the whistle and breathed no evil, it's on the back of the book. It's called Novichok or Newcomer. In order to skirt the chemical weapons ban treaty, they developed a binary weapon. But here's what I'm going to say. The fact that this is breaking tonight on the 25th, 2014, that they're sending the state-of-the-art, and they're prepared with that to develop an instantaneous vaccine. What will it say to you, Doctor? What will it say to you, Doug? Doug, I want your answer. You're the private detective. Then, Doc, you chime in. If the state-of-the-art lab, the state-of-the-art, and these are top scientists. These are world-class scientists. These aren't like somebody once mocked and said, well, these are probably just microbiologists that teach at university. Believe me, the Russians have an amazing brilliance when it comes to biological and chemical weapons. They do. The point being is that what would it say to you, Doug Hagmann, as an investigator, if the Russians basically say we have developed a vaccine, we are there to here in Guinea to basically help the government. That's what they're saying, and we have found evidence of a bioweapons. And for the record, there are certain trace signatures in every bioweapon that can usually track back to the country that developed it. What would you think the world response to that would be, Doug?
America would be looked upon as a pariah, as it's intended to be. Obviously, I believe that this is part, as the doctor had said, asymmetrical warfare. I believe that this is part of the I would believe, based on that information, that this is part of the asymmetrical warfare in which we are embroiled, and of course that we are being outed. We are being pantsed by Russia. I don't mean to make light of this, but in other words, what they're saying is, look, people, look what your government, look what your Western intelligence agencies, look what they're doing to you on purpose. Look what the globalists are doing. And that's obviously my take on this.
Well, I think that's accurate.
Well,
yep.
One of the things that's interesting is I think that the fact that the CDC said we're sending over 50 people to study this. The Russians are sending people over to solve this. And the immunology is where you're looking at the virology, you're looking at the virus itself, and you're seeing what parts of it could you form a vaccine to. Now, many people don't know this, but Russia is about 140 million people. We're 335 million people. We're touted as having one of the top medical systems in the world. Mayo Clinic, you got Emory, you got all these places, Cleveland Clinic, you've got fantastic medical centers. So the Russians, who are not nearly well off as we are, can send the best people over there, and it's really kind of shameful. I mean, you know, for the CDC to not be leading the way and leading the charge, you know, at what point are you going to lead? You know, what is it that we lead in anymore? I just can't think of anything, but this would be embarrassing. I'd be grateful to the Russians. I would not know that, you know, that would hold a lot of political clout. I don't think the Russian scientists who have come up with a lot of cures, I don't think the Russian scientists would necessarily hold us back from the world, but it would be a pretty impressive shift in the entire world dynamics where Putin has been driving the charge. His popularity is very high. Our president's very low. He's focusing on this Ebola. You know, I'm not going to go into what Obama's been doing. But I mean, and saying this as I want our president, I want our country, I want our leaders, I want the CDC. I mean, my God, what are all these tax dollars going for? If we're paying people at the CDC to lead, and we have all these great scientists, and I'm sure we do. And Doug, I'm not sure. I mean, Steve, I'm not sure people really know what you're talking about the mass resignation at the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, where they've been studying all these diseases and from mild to very lethal type stuff. When you say mass resignations, in just plain common English, quickly tell the audience what you're really saying that they're doing.
Well, first of all, it happened almost a month ago, and I'll pull it up the next time you speak. But the problem is that 2 or 3 of the heads, and I could quote their names a couple weeks ago. I can't now. But
that's okay.
when I was on with Doug, I said, Doug, this is indicative of they know what's going on behind the scenes, and they didn't want to be attached to it. What you just said, Doctor, is exactly why they quit. We are supposed to be the head of everything, and yet the feeble attempt, not only attempt, the feeble will study it. That's BS. I'm sorry. That is human waste product. That is bovine excrement. We are absolutely capable of getting almost a simultaneous diagnostic from this. The military has the equipment. And so what I see Russia doing, and rightly so, is they're sending their crack immunologists and virologists over there to the rest of the world. The point being, a lot of Africans already believe that the AIDS virus, and I'm one of the people, Dr. Len Horowitz basically established it through all the grants, we introduce AIDS into Africa. So if it turns out that there is a genetic marker, and again, let me say this, according to the scientists I know that are absolutely beyond genius level, when genetic markers can be picked up, they can be typed to either a specific group of scientists, they can definitely be typed to a specific country, and I think that the bottom line is a giveaway. You brought it up at the beginning of the show. Would they take down an airliner for one Ebola expert? They absolutely would, in order to basically keep the plausible deniability going, and also to basically do what they've done in the killing of over 100 scientists, keep every bit of weapons development contained so that A doesn't lead to B and we get all the way through the alphabet to Z. What Doug just said is absolutely true. You see, you're thinking as a logical medical doctor who has been trained to do no harm and to help people. It is such a mind shock, if you will, to most Americans to even believe that what you're seeing is a medical, biological weapon version of the Hegelian dialectic. The Hegelian dialectic is simply this. You invent a problem. You have the solution to the problem, and by providing your solution to the problem you generated, you come out with the desired results. It's called thesis, antithesis, synthesis. So the point is I think, by the way, I think this is brilliant, and I think it's also an amazing thing to do because Russia's not stupid. People that dismiss Vladimir Putin and Lavrov is one of the smartest, I will say this, on my studying foreign ministers. He's one of the brightest men in the world. They know that this thing has the capability to seep into the Russian Federation. Saying that, guess what? They're going to stop it at the source. And I think it's an absolute brilliant political move. I believe it's a humane move, and I think it absolutely just shows the embarrassing position of supposedly the most well-funded country in the world, blah, blah, blah. It's going to lead, and I believe this is a fulfillment, Doug. I've got to say this and get it off my heart. I believe this is a fulfillment of the word of the Lord. That single article is posted on my website now, that the Lord, and I've been saying it for years, before he allows America to be destroyed by the Russians and Chinese, I'm not inventing this after the fact, he's going to show the sins of the leaders of the people to the people and the people's sins before their God. I got to tell you, brother, this is so amazing. Thank you, Beata, for sending that to me. This is, if you will, in my opinion, this is the Rosetta Stone. In my opinion, it's supernaturally brilliant. And look, God can use anybody he chooses to use, and I believe this is one more case that's going to show. And as proof of that, Doctor, Doug, you can tell the people what's going on. We are being jammed. We are being messed with. Our live streams are being, what was it called, Doug? It's just basically we got trolls and we got evil entities screwing with us. Do we not?
Yes, sir, we do. We're getting reports of our live stream being scrambled, or the voices being scrambled, people unable to connect or people unable to stay connected. Folks, we're doing what we can behind the scenes. You've got to understand that we're fighting this tooth and nail, okay? Please understand that we're doing everything possible we can to keep this stream going on multiple fronts. But this will be available in its entirety because of a secondary recording source via archive. So just understand that.
Well, Doug, I think, we saw some comments before, and I'd just like to reiterate to people, is the truth shall come out. Whether it's on the Internet or on YouTube and replay, these people can make an attempt to scramble this. And, please understand, people, that Doug and Steve and myself, to some degree, are taking certain chances and risks to be able to bring you this information. We have nothing to gain and everything to lose except what we are called to do. And we are messengers, and God has put this on our heart. And, I think that it's amazing that all the money we have, maybe it just worked out this way, but what if the Russians sit back and let us fumble the ball? And then it would really look ridiculous if they go over there and at least make some headway, even if they don't come up with a vaccine. They show up with their best people. And I'm also speaking of our Congress and our Senate. I'm not just going to say the White House, but you know what? Lead or get out of the way. And it's obviously that Americans think, and this is why so many people around the world hate America, is the arrogance. And, to me, it aches my soul to see a West African grandmother or West African young mother, black lady, suffer a horrible death. As Ed Isaac said, it's the worst death he's ever seen in his life. It would just be horrendous. You've got wild, crazy pictures about what's going on with ISIS and what they're doing to people, but this is basically paramount to this. If nothing else, and it's not a planted outbreak, and it's a spontaneous outbreak, well, how can it go from December, January, February, March, April, May, June, July, before our government gets up in front of Congress and says, we need to do something about this? Really? I mean, what are we paying you for? Lead or get out of the way. And if people in our government and our Congress are not going to stand up for people's lives, there's going to be blood on your hands at judgment. You can't take that away. And so, I believe that we're called right now at this moment and this time to tell people what the situation is, why it's occurring, because that's important, what you should do, and why it is, the factors. And many people may not know this, but if a virus mutates, well, then whatever vaccine you had will no longer work. It turns out the Ebola virus has different strains, and it can mutate. So the Zaire strain, which appears to be the one that's going on right now, is the most lethal. Now, in the Congo this weekend, yesterday, discovered that the two people that died, one died of a pure Zaire virus, and the other one, which is very lethal, and the other one was a mixture between the Sudanese and the Zaire. It's possible that there are multiple different forms or subforms of the virus out there. It's possible that another form, a different form that's yet to be delivered, could be delivered to the United States via these people coming across the borders, and people are outstaying their visas. And, how many, heart-wrenching stories did you hear? How many people died at 9/11 and all of the fumbling, all the stuff that goes on? If I make a mistake and somebody dies, people are going to be on my case, like on a fly on a banana. But if millions of people are at risk and danger, where's the accountability of the people who are in charge? I don't see it being there, and they're not even coming out and saying, we're doing this, we're doing that, we're doing this. They're not even making any statements. They're letting basically the free press just kind of report whatever, and there's nobody leading the charge. So it's like a boat. There's nobody at the helm. So Steve and I just said, you know what, this is red alert, and we may not ever be able to broadcast again. If we go into a quarantine and they shut everything down, wherever you're at, whatever you're doing, there were people in 9/11 that were on trains, and they were stuck in places for days. I happened to be in Alaska and moose hunting, and I didn't even know anything about it. It was 4 days before they came pick me up. We thought, we had no food. We made it out alive, but there's a lot of people that literally thought, that they were going to die. So what if this goes on 42 days and you are someplace? I'm not trying to scare people who are going to take a vacation, but you know what? You need to start having backup plans. I wouldn't make a vacation if I didn't have the cancellation insurance. I would make sure. Please listen to me. Make sure that you have your family affairs in order. Make sure you have your financial affairs in order. Make sure that you sit down with your family and you have a sobering talk. I see this over and over and over. Something sudden and bad happens, and all of a sudden, my dad got killed when I was 19. My mom was 44. My dad was 46. All of a sudden, my mom had a different life. If this virus comes through and it wipes out your kids, if it wipes out you as the dad, who's going to take care of the mom? Who's going to financially provide for them? You need to – this may not sound like a comfortable conversation to be talking about trusts and wills and things like that, but you know what? If you do nothing, you're going to fall into this abyss they call the probate court. Now, these are just little side vignettes. I'm talking about – it has so many rippling effects. It's not just your health. It's not just people suffering. And it aches my heart that these men and women who are on the front lines fighting this infection are not even getting the proper equipment. I was relieved to see at least the Chinese were flying it in on 747s after our last presentation. I don't know if the Chinese were listening, if they responded. Thank God the Russians are. But do you see the fall of American leadership here? We're not taking the hard, we're not getting in the saddle. And that's, people, you're going to have to make your leaders quit, arguing. And to me right now, this is not a political statement, but I see grave danger of people who are coming across. You're letting them in, and it's unrestrained, overwhelming the system, and now they're going to have to be educated in school. They're going to get health care. Many people are very illiterate. They don't know English. They come here. If you don't see, just with that, how easy this whole thing can spread, really. You need to turn the TV off, and you need to start reading some books on logic and knowledge, because, and to do nothing is just pure ignorance. It's just ignorant.
Amen. Amen.
You're not caring about your fellow man. And I care as much about every one of those kids and every one of those people in West Africa as I do about my patients here in America. Those people, when they suffer and they don't even have any kind of attention, and people are afraid to go in there, and yet we have organizations that will go in there and they can't even get the equipment. And men and women every day laying their lives down, and who knows what we're going to be exposed to here in the near future, and it's going to be flu season. And how are you going to distinguish? Do you not think that when you go down with a viral illness, every single person's going to say, Ebola? You not think you might not have your boss telling you, well, maybe you need to stay home for a couple of weeks, or the school. Well, don't bring them back until they've got, seen a doctor and they've been cleared. There's a lot of ramifications, people, here. So if you can keep yourself from getting infected, it's critical. It's critical.
Okay, Dr. Steve, what about forced immunizations and vaccinations? What about that? You've written about that extensively, Steve.
Well, first of all, we all heard in real time when SARS and some of the other viruses we're told we're going to. It was interesting. With SARS, they wanted to bring the whole world to a global shutdown, and with this, the Ebola, they're basically doing everything they can, in my educated opinion, to promote it. The trouble I have is that it's not a science fiction stretch to believe that these entities that want everyone dead, and again, ladies and gentlemen, I just posted 30 of the most famous quotes and links that Michael Snyder did that basically show you that these are not loving, kind globalists who have your best interests at heart. The number one concern I have, Doug, is that people will be, I guess you'd say, scared into taking the Ebola vaccine, and I'm not taking anything that they generate. Now, someone said, well, they'll come against you with a bayonet and a gun. Well, they probably come against me with a whole lot more than that. But the bottom line is that I come against them in the name of the Lord, and I believe this. I believe that the Christian has a functional authority. I can't explain why the slaughter is taking place in Africa. I can tell you this, that slaughter of the men, women, and children, the Christians, has gone on unattested by the current administration. Well, it's obvious. They are basically promoting Islam and hating Christianity. Not once has the commander-in-chief or the commandeer-in-thief stood up and said anything about it, except beheading is a horrible thing. The bottom line is that we have got to recognize this for what it is, that when you're dealing with a Hegelian dialectic, Hegel, look it up, Hegel, it would not surprise me to cause the greatest fear imaginable with the most gruesome images. And then, look, the elite already have whatever they're going to release on us, they already have the antidote, because the number one naive question that I get asked in email, well, why would they do that? They'll kill themselves. No, they won't. They will make sure they don't kill themselves. They're going to make sure they kill you. So the point is that, there's a lot of people out there, Doug, talking about, the vaccine. I would take no vaccine that they generate because, number one, I think we forget everything. And I think as Christians we lose track of the most important point. Again, I love the red letter words of Jesus. He said the whole world lies in the evil one. It's really so basic to understand that liars are of their father, the devil. And people say, I don't believe in a devil. We are watching his plan unfold right before your very eyes. And as Doc said, maybe you will when it comes home. I think some of the things that when we're talking about preps, I want to share a dream. And I pay a lot of attention to this sister in the Lord because this is a dream she had. And I think it was, good night, probably at least 6 months ago. And she writes to me, Steve, what about the dream I had with the deadly vial? I think it's posted on my website, by the way, in Dreams and Vision. The two people who had the vial were the Russian leaders. How does this play into the current picture, I wonder, or does it? Basically, the meaning of the dream that the American public was asleep and the Russians came in as friends and took over the country. Friends until they displayed the deadly vial. And I just sent her back and said, possibly that would be the evidence used against us. And people, can I share something with you? Can you imagine such a paradigm shift that entities within our own government would design the ultimate killing virus only to have it proven and linked back to us, just like you said, okay, Doug? So I believe that my intercessor friend had this dream, and I believe that that's what she saw. I can't say that I can say that 100%, but what I'm saying this specifically, I would take nothing that they would propose as a vaccine. And I find it interesting, Doc, that they're, never do they have vaccines on hand when the outbreak happens. It is absolutely not historical precedent. Now, again, here's something, too. This is something from another MD, Patricia, God bless you. And she said, listening to Dr. S and Steve on your wonderful show, please make this point. As shopping in megastores, Walmart, any stores, stores of prep, use cash. If an index case shows up and has shopped where we have used plastic, the authorities will be able to place us in that crowd and will come to take us to the quarantine center. Better yet, purchase now before index cases appear. So what she's saying is if you shop at any place that you use a credit card or you use a, store card like Costco, Sam's Club or anything, everything that you buy, by the way, people need to know this. It goes into the DHS database, and you also need to know that the biggest mart stores have a button on their cash register, and basically they take pictures, and they're told to look out for people who are preppers. Remember this, a prepper is a threat to a totalitarian government because it allows you to live independently of them. And here is the patience and faith of the saints. The idea that this is all planned cannot be overlooked and cannot be set aside as some conspiracy. You cannot read the quotes for population control. You cannot see the agenda playing out. You cannot see that the very people that were the former Secretary of State is into this lock, stock, and barrel. Global war is a prerequisite for the return of the Imam Mahdi, hence the total destabilization of the Middle East. You cannot get away from the fact that Mazzini's letter to Albert Pike, which Hawk quotes all the time, the Third World War is planned to get the Muslims against the Christians and Jews. The bottom line is that's playing out. So the idea of a planetary mass death event, and why they'll use biological and in some cases chemical, is because it's quick, it's dirty, and you don't have to worry about delivery systems being interfered with, counter-missile systems. You basically just infect people, and Atlanta's the hub for Delta Airlines. So the point is, and this is why I wrote about it, Doug, and I've screamed about it, and I think again, thank you for the show, but I think Dr. S is pretty accurate in what he just said. Perhaps this is the last show we ever do. I don't know that I'll do another show with you on Ebola, because tonight I'm praying that we do as much as we can. Look, there's a wonderful doctor and his wife, Dr. Alton. You know him, don't you, Dr. S? And yes, they write under Dr. Bones. I mean, the man is absolutely dedicated to sharing with people all that he's writing out in his medical articles, and even to using antibiotics that you can get now under some situation you can't get at a later date. But it's more important than this. Here's the thing, and I'm going to turn it back over. The Apostle Paul said that any man that doesn't provide for his family is worse than an infidel. And it's not the fact that someone says, well, I'm just going to lay down and die and go to heaven. Well, that's nice, but what's the rest of your family who wants to live do with your stinking carcass? So there are things in the whole preparation mode for a pandemic. And I want to say something else. Ready-Made Resources has a neat little deal. Any gas mask that doesn't have a power-assisted power respirator is a negative pressure mask. That means you've got to suck in. A positive pressure mask, and this is a neat little deal that fits on the end of a filter, a standard 40-millimeter filter. It's all the militaries pretty much of the world use them in the new contemporary stuff, police departments, FBI, CIA, everybody uses them. And this is an inexpensive way
of turning your negative pressure gas mask into a positive pressure gas mask. I only use positive pressure stuff, and it's inexpensive. It's so critical, because every time we've had a scare, we've had gas masks, and when you have a positive pressure gas mask for children, it's a must. Children's lungs have not developed to the point where they can suck a gas mask. That's why the Israelis and others who have invented child containment centers for infants and then toddlers, full head suits, if you will. That's being proactive. And I'm telling you this, my guess is that once you start talking about this stuff, same thing with gloves. Gloves are the most important thing you have. I mean, obviously suit and respirator, but how many people have extra rubber gloves or have what I call battlefield gloves, which are butyl rubber, and they usually have a cotton liner? Well, the gloves basically are the last thing you take off, and there's a way to decontaminate, and there's a way that once you put on all this stuff, you have to have basically a decontamination chamber where you're sprayed down, where you're hosed down, and everything is basically put aside before you enter a protected space. So there are amazing inexpensive technologies. I think those respirator things are $20, $30. They're not super expensive. And they're a little mini fan that goes on the 40-millimeter tube. So not everybody says, well, I can't afford those. Well, what you can afford to do is basically learn everything you can learn. And, Doc brought up a point about how people can earn extra money. If somebody does their homework, one of the neatest ways to do this is not to pass yourself off as an expert, but say charge a $10 fee to have a 3-hour session at the Holiday Inn or someplace, maybe a public library, and basically bring people in and tell them what you know. Most people can afford, $10 now? Is that 2 cups of coffee? I'm not a coffee drinker, but maybe 3 cups of coffee.
One and a half.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it tells you I've dated myself by not being a coffee drinker, but there's practical things you can do. And here's the thing. I'm going to share this. The person that knows what's going on, and if they're flat out broke, they can turn that knowledge into a meeting. You post little, flyers on telephone posts or wherever it's legal, and just say, look, we're going to have a meeting, $5, $10. You get 20 people, that's $200, okay? Now, I want to say one last thing, and we're getting close to the top of the hour. Food is critical. The food, and we haven't even got in, but the intentional contamination of food. I believe we're already seeing the trial run for all of the meat recalls and everything else. If anybody hasn't figured it out, we're seeing the cutting of the protein sources to the American public, either through pricing, either through infection, or basically whatever they're claiming, contamination. And the food sources themselves are being intentionally compromised. And I got an email, and the person suggested that maybe the reason why all of the the canine diseases and the pork diseases are out there is because, to the world of Islam, guess what? Pigs and dogs are unclean. And if we're at the top of the hour, Dog, I think we are.
Good point. Good, yeah, we are. Good point, Joe. Isn't that a good point? Wow.
Absolutely.
Fantastic.
Great first 2 hours, very informative. We have 1 hour coming up. Right after this short break, we're talking about the global Ebola outbreak, planned population reductions, pandemics, and forced immunizations with Steve Quayle and Dr. S on this Monday edition of the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. We'll be right back. And Dr. S talking about Ebola, the threat it poses, what we can expect, what to watch out for. With that, Steve, I'll give it back to you, and you can lead us through this final hour.
Well, we're right now at the critical time point where everything is happening. See, one of the things that's fascinating, people who are linear, a doctor's linear, people like me are not linear. I'm not making an excuse for being all over the place, but one of the things that has been my concern is that understanding how this thing is going to play out, in the sense that every area will be overwhelmed. I can even see the cash being an issue when you're using cash. At some point, they're claiming that cash is contaminated. I think I dealt with that in Breathe No Evil. The point being that postage stamps can be the ultimate growing medium for a biological weapon. Can you ever imagine getting an envelope? I talked to Bob at Ready Made Resources, and he does everything from microwave his male, very smart, to taking super precautions. And I don't think anyone should be shopping. And I want to say something. Gloves are critical, and unfortunately, latex gloves in the real world, in a surgical situation, they work okay. Obviously, they work as designed, but when you're in a real situation, most people don't understand that gloves are critical. Years ago, I used to have a store. It was called SafeTrack. I no longer do what Bob does, so, order your stuff from him. But one of the things that I still have, and I remember why I bought them, I have over, thousands of pairs of the butyl rubber gloves with these are the kind the military uses with the cotton liners. The reason the cotton liners go in, obviously you can keep the liner on after you strip the outer butyl rubber glove, and it's designed to be able to deal with chemicals too. The normal situation with the rubber gloves, they're not designed for super caustic chemical agents. So, hey, if anybody's interested, and I've got them in my warehouse, and they're brand new in boxes, you can just send me an email and put gloves, and I'll sell them for $2.50 a piece or 2 for $5. You'll pay shipping, but I've got a whole bunch of them. And the reason why I'm saying that is because Bob reminded me that gloves are ever so critical. And I think that people just don't know where to get this stuff. And here's the problem in all this, and I'll turn it right back over to the doctor. It's too late. It doesn't matter if it's 1 minute, 1 day, or 1 month too late. Too late doesn't need any qualifiers in front of it except to say too late. So the point is that if the original Ebola outbreak is a biological test on a weapons form of Ebola, today changed everything with the announcement of Ebola Zaire. Zaire is obviously the area in Africa where the most lethal form. And here's what I'm seeing. I just received an email that of the 240 medical workers that were dealing with this stuff using the availability of what they had, 120 of them are dead. Well, that's a 50% death rate amongst the healthcare workers. So literally, I'm telling people, if they don't get it, when you go to and doctor, when I turn it right back over to you, which I'm going to do, I want you to share about woman's purse, the things, and even credit cards, the nature of germs on credit cards. I think the bottom line is that when people understand that in a panic, and in a generated panic, and I would say in a nourished panic, that means the talking heads on the Vomit Comet, which is network TV, every day coming into your living room, the fullest flash of vomit, my definition of vomit, is untruths digested so that you, and this is their idea, not mine, that we, the poor dumb masses, can be sucked into whatever. So the point being is that I think that we're right there right now, and I think that, people have got to understand the best time to go to grocery stores is when the least amount of people are there, not on weekends but weeknights. And as you can go and check in my alert section, I want to say two things. My alert section is updated as long as I'm awake. So if somebody sends me an email telling me this is going on or that's going on, that's the place to go on my website. But the bottom line is that while you can get the knowledge, can I say something? Knowledge is the perfect BS filter, because what I'm trying to get people to understand by running through the 5 different things I ran through in the second hour or whenever is that this thing is a planned release. The CDC's response and everything else is planned. The quitting of the former heads and the high-ranking people there, it's planned. They knew what was going to come down. So, ladies and gentlemen, you've got to listen to the doctor's suggestion, because there are things you want. Here's a golden rule. You want to be where everyone else isn't in a panic. Self-isolation. That means, if you've got kids, how do you keep kids locked up or confined for 42 days? Do you have 42 days of infant not formula? Better to breastfeed, but if you can't, obviously the best formula that's not, filled with garbage coming from Southeast Asia. The point is do you have enough diapers? Now, what do you do with all your waste? How do you get rid of waste? Have you already dug a pit that, given the situation, you'll be able to, bury your super hefty trash bags? And by the way, buy the trash bags. They're the heaviest mill. The construction bags or the contractor's bags have a lot of value, and God forbid, but should you need to bury somebody, you have to seal off the corpse. And I'm sorry to be that way. And God knows I wouldn't want to bury my grandchildren. I wouldn't want anybody burying me at this point. I don't want to see any death. And Jesus said He came that we might have life and have it more abundantly. But if we're stuck on stupid as a permanent destination resort and are apathetic, indifferent, and denying everything, gee, it sounds like half my emailers. The bottom line is we're going to pay the price. Go ahead, Doc.
Well, I think all of these are critical factors, and I want to thank you for making these really high-grade gloves that would keep people from getting infected available so cheap and readily available. And that's something that a lot of times people don't think about. In fact, 2 or 3 of my friends that have actually ordered from Bob at Ready Made Resources, I said, well, you need to order like 2 extra masks and maybe 4 extra or 3 extra suits. And they say, why? And I said, well, what happens if you get a hole in one of them? I mean, what happens if, your brother-in-law comes over? One of the most graphic things about the movie Contagion was when he had to tell his daughter she could no longer see her boyfriend. I mean, it's a movie and everything, but it dramatizes what if that's your brother-in-law and his family knocking at the door, but you don't know where they've been, and if you let them in, you've just let them in and to bring it with you. And then it may not be the mom or dad. Maybe it's been a kid. Maybe the parents have asked the kids, have you been around anybody who's been sick? They don't know. They say no. So, this is going to have ramifications way beyond what you can imagine. And, again, one of the things is we're not here to indict anybody, but to have knowledge and do nothing is almost like to be a co-conspirator. And you may be passive, but the fact you don't know anything. And, think how horrific this country wrenched over 9/11. Now, I'm going to read you something here just for a second. This is just so that people will, maybe, Steve, what we're saying will drive it home a little bit more. This is today. It was on Katie Couric, Yahoo News. It said, now this is quotes by the Obama White House was left reeling after the savage slaughter of an American journalist held hostage by ISIS terrorists. And by the way, they tried to extract him, rescue him, I think this last summer. And then, it's very interesting. You have 2 very high-ranking officials who were part of the 9/11 Commission. And New Jersey Governor Tom Keene, who led the 9/11 Commission, told ABC News last week, he said, along with Lee Hamilton, a Democrat, they recently met with about 20 of the top intelligence officials in preparation for the Commission's latest threat report. They said, they're beyond a terrorist group. They marry ideology, sophistication, and strategic tactical. It says, I was appalled at the ignorance of the intelligence community. And I'm thinking, really? I mean, I'm sitting out here in middle America, and I see what they're doing, and they're beheading all these people, and what part did you not figure out? I mean, really, what Steve's making the point is, why is there such a slow response to call evil evil? Why is there such a slow response? Even if, the Kurds begged for weapons, and people that were going to fight these people. Our military hadn't gotten around to giving it to them. Why? We let them have all these weapons. But, without proper equipment, I guess maybe this will be a transformational night. And, I don't know what the right moniker is. It's prepare yourself and your family or suffer the consequences. And they'll suffer the consequences of your inadequacy, your ignorance, and your apathy. You have just sentenced your children to live or to die. Now, that may sound like an extreme statement coming from a physician, but, frequently I have family members bringing the husband in who didn't want to come into the hospital, who's having a heart attack and he's in cardiogenic shock. Thank God they did. And I asked him, well, why didn't you come in? He goes, well, I thought it'd finally go away. I said, it usually does when you die. But the family members acted in a concert fashion. And this is what we're going to have. And so let me just warn everybody around the world. The problem with the mainstream news is they give you little snippets, and you just catch a little glimpse of something. This is something that your life and your family's life depend on. If you don't do your research and you don't begin to understand this and you don't note these things and do something about them and have a checklist and preparation and all that kind of stuff, this is a systematic problem. This is not solved with, sending a donation. This is not solved with a quick trip to the store. This is a vigilance. This is an increasing vigilance. And, I think one of the hard parts is, having told people about this, Steve, they really kind of almost couldn't believe what I was saying. And I said, I know it's very hard for me to say this, and I held off 2 weeks on sending out an email to my friends to kind of give them some ideas about what to do and what to buy. And it's almost like people are in a state of either denial or shock. I think it's shock. They're thinking, how in the world could you be sounding the alarm about this when our national leaders aren't? And that's the point Steve's trying to bring, is our national leaders have known about this. They're not leading on this. They've just brushed it under the rug. Why do you think that is? There is a reason, because if we have something we really cared about, we're on it like nobody's business. But you have people who have been on the 9/11 commissions who are sitting back going, I cannot believe that this administration and the intelligence, that you guys do not have any better handle on these people, and these guys are the worst of the worst. They're far worse than the Al-Qaeda. And they've mixed in with some of the Chechens. They've mixed, and we're talking elite military, our elite intelligence people are going, wow, these guys are just, they're just killing machines. But to your point about our responsibilities and the gear, it's like all of these things we're talking about tonight is going to become part of your life. And so food and water, and because Steve was trying to make the point, Doug's trying to make the point, I'm trying to make the point, these are ever-present dangers. They are not going away. And if we may we'll get over this Ebola virus, and at the top of the program, I said the CDC and the World Health Organization said it would be a minimum of 6 to 9 months. 6 to 9 months before we know whether or not we have something under control that's growing and getting worse, and countries are beginning to cut off borders, and some countries are not even allowing certain people in there if they don't have certain passports. So, I think that you need to really begin to sit down and draw this up, talk. And again, if you do things, and like you said about the water, the food, I just think about if the reason we're saying quarantine 42 days is because it takes a 21-day incubation period. So if you were exposed, it'd take 21 days to see if you have it. If you did have it, then the people around you would be potentially infected for another 21 days. So you get 21 and 21, that's 42. So that's basically 6 weeks, okay? So most people don't have 6 weeks of water and food. But did you know if you go on FEMA's website, they tell you that you ought to be prepared for having at least 2 to 3 weeks, whether it's a tornado or hurricane. These are pandemics, and we're not necessarily going to be able to predict them. We're not going to know where they're going to pop up. But when they start popping up in America, and I think they most certainly will, what are you going to do? Well, and like Steve said, the credit card. One of the things it was very poignant. The credit card that Gwyneth Paltrow used in The Contagion. How many people use a credit card? Give it to a waiter. The waiter's handling food. He goes back. He takes your credit card, and he goes back and he swipes it. Do you think whatever was on your credit card got on his hands, and then he's going to touch the next person's food? You got to understand the transmissibility here, how easy one person touches it and goes to the next person, next person, next person. And I was at this exclusive hotel this weekend at this meeting, and I suggested him, I said, with all the groups of people that you have come through here, I'm kind of surprised that you don't have at least some Purell bottles sitting out or some kind of decontamination, and or have some Clorox wipes or something like that in the rooms. And one guy looked at me and I said, I know, yeah, a lot of people get accused of germaphobes, but people, wake up. We're in a world where you have organisms and infections that are deadly, that are lethal, there is no cure, that are basically spread hand to hand. Somebody shakes your hand. Somebody touches you. You're just friendly or whatever, you know. And, I mean, I was talking to some military personnel, and, you know, they're very apprehensive. They're very concerned. So, you know, there's just all kinds of things going on around you that you don't know. Read Steve's website. Listen to Hagmann and Hagmann. Go to Drudge Report. People. These are some of the sources where people are giving you some information. You know, if we're wrong, and we hope we are, that it's not as bad, great. But when my government has no clue and they're not leading, and the Russians are over there leading, and the Chinese are leading, and we got people in basically they're trapped in death camps because, you know, if they don't have it now, they've got it now, because people that weren't infected are around people who are infected. And you got to remember, as I brought out in the first program, the people in those countries are 3 of the poorest countries in the world. They have less than $100 per year spent on health care. Most Americans buy more Tylenol and more ibuprofen than that. And think how much money you spend on lattes or you spend on Starbucks, which I love. I love coffee. But you know what? You could maybe like cut back on some of that stuff. You could start diverting it to food and water. You can call up and Doug and Steve will be able at the end of the hour or on their website suggest some people or websites that are people that are knowledgeable about what you're trying to defend yourself against. And I tell my friends, you can call Bob at Ready Made Resources, him and his wife. I've been in their home. You know, I mean, as in Bob's home, he gave me 4 books that Steve had written. And he goes, man, you got to read this. You got to read this. The guy knows what he's going on. And Steve's devoting his life to this. He's not like out just trying to, I mean, they're taking risks with their lives with all this information. Whether or not you choose to believe it, the people who knew about 9/11, they've ignored it. The people who've known about terrorist attacks and catastrophes and have ignored it. Do you really want to put your life in the hands of government officials? Tell me what government organization besides our military actually work. I can't think of one, particularly the IRS. And I've been audited 3 out of the last 5 years, so maybe hope this doesn't bring another audit. But, you know, it's like, and it's just the crazy stuff that's going on in the world. And we're seeing diseases there are no cures for. People, this is you know, we've had all these years. Americans are soft. They're lazy. You know, you're not preparing. There's cultures and there's groups of people in our country that have a year's worth of food and water on hand. There's people that are willing to help you. If you said to some of your friends or maybe some people in the church, hey, you know, if anybody has $50 or $100 or $200, you know, and you can buy your rubber boots at Sam's or Walmart. You can buy your, you know, get all the duct tape you can get. But one of the things you need to think about is home safety. You know, and like I have things that keep my doors from being breached. I know Steve knows about those. I know Bob with Ready Made Resources know about that. They have them at Lowe's. You need to start thinking about having lights and you know, you need to defend yourself. And, you know, nobody likes to think about having to use a gun, but in that movie Contagion, Matt Damon watched his neighbors being executed by robbers. If our police and our military and our healthcare system is overrun and overtaxed, do you think they're going to be able to be out here and prevent crime? No. And the police, I've got some great friends who are in law enforcement, dedicated, put their life on the line every day, do everything they can. And they'll tell you there's all kinds of rapes, murders, kidnappings, home invasions, and all the kind of stuff like that's going on all the time. Don't be naive. Don't be naive. I mean, if you were going to get a conceal and carry, get a conceal and carry. If you're going to carry, carry. I mean, only 30% of people that get a conceal and carry, carry. If you're going to carry, carry. You know? And I'm not trying to put people into fear, but the police will tell you, and it's constitutional, just let's get this straight. There's been at least 7 cases before the Supreme Court where the police department was sued because somebody was killed and the police had a chance to interact or intercept it or prevent it, and they didn't. and the people sued the police department and said that they should have been there and prevented that, and every time the Supreme Court said no. The police do not have a legal, constitutional obligation to protect you individually. That is your responsibility. It comes back to personal accountability. That's why Steve and I are on the program tonight. We're trying to tell you why this is worse than it was 4 weeks ago. There's no end in sight. Now they're 9 weeks. Now we have the WHO. Why wasn't the WHO in April and May going, hey, we got a problem down here? They weren't. Okay, if they weren't, why? Why wasn't the CDC? What were they doing? Well, we don't think. You know what was really sickening about the testimony that these people from the CDC, and I'm glad they're there, respect the job they do. What was really sad is none of them had been over there to that country and seen what the suffering had happened. And when I was in Joplin, and there were 5 people killed in the hospital. One person was sucked out a window. There was a lady who was a permanent no-code blue that basically the ceiling fell in and knocked her off her ventilator. We couldn't get to her. But when we stepped out into that water and those lights, some lights were still on, and we put our life on the line, that was an emergency situation. That was do or die. We didn't get to those people, they died. Nobody died after the initial tornado. 100 and something people were evacuated in, I forget, like 83 minutes, and FEMA and the National Guard said it was the largest evacuation in the shortest period of time successfully done that they know of in history. And even the people on the news channel, on the weather channel, did an end-of-the-year report and talked about the Joplin tornado. And that was just something that happened to our town, to that town. 160 people were killed, more than any other. But our point is we have this tsunami wave of this infection and disease coming at us. We don't know when it's going to hit. We don't know where it's going to hit, but it's going to hit. Let me ask you this way, Steve. What makes people think that if it's in West Africa and now it's in Congo and it's in these other countries, and due to 84 flights that are landing in America every day, and some airlines are quit flying to these countries, what makes them think they are not going to get it? I mean, just by how diseases spread, if it's hand-to-hand contact, and you can get it by the air you breathe, and you're traveling through airports, and you're in malls, and it's that time of year, and it's hot and it's sweaty, you know, if you don't have enough baby formula, if you don't have enough pet formula, your pets are going to die. I mean, if you don't have enough baby formula, and your kids are going to look up at you like they do around the world, and they say, Daddy, I'm thirsty. It's too late. You missed the boat. You were lazy. You were too preoccupied. I'll get to it tomorrow. Really? You know, so at some point in time, as I've been trying to sort of get my friends in this mode, you may ignore it, but it's not just going to be you going to pay the price. But our emergency medical system, you know, we have an ability. We bring people in, we triage them, and, you know, this is not going to be something that the smaller hospitals are going to be able to handle, which is going to narrow down the number of hospitals that are able to handle it. And just if you take 25 people that come in and they have to be isolated, we don't have the beds to isolate 25 people, not in a hospital that has 400 or 500 beds. Those are extra beds, and the hospitals are basically got nursing shortage, doctor shortage. They've got people that, you know, are in it. Let me give you a scenario. You come into the emergency room, you check in. So you see the doctor, you see the nurse, somebody takes your temperature, and then somebody comes and takes your vitals, and then the doctor comes and sees you and says, well, we need to order some blood tests. So somebody comes from the laboratory. They touch you, they draw your blood, they're next to you, you're breathing on them, they're breathing on you, and they leave. Could they not take it back to the lab? Could they not, somebody brings you some medicine from pharmacy, they go back to the pharmacy, somebody takes you from x-ray, takes you over to CAT scan or to MRI. Could you not take it there and put it on the table? You know, with laying there on the table? Is the virucidal wipe, is the decontamination? Let me give you an example. Go to Drudge Report. Go read about the Ebola outbreak in these other countries and look at the pictures and look at the garb that these healthcare workers are wearing and tell me if that's what you're seeing in America. Answer is no. So and it's because, okay, they're further down the road than we are on this, but it would just be ludicrous and stupid. God was just thinking, He gave man a free choice and a free will. What are you going to do tonight with your free choice and your free will? Are you going to dig in and read about this? Are you going to go to Steve's website? Are you going to read Breed No Evil? I mean, if our problem is this germ warfare or this germ or this virus, whatever, don't you think you ought to be at least aware of all of the issues? We don't know everything. You don't know everything. But when we have basically people coming across the border in droves, we have evidence that the ISIS is already here. We have basically pictures of them showing of city spots in Chicago and in Washington. They've already said they're going to fly the flag on top of the White House. You got people from 9/11 and people who know Al-Qaeda and our top officials who are saying these people are the worst of the worst. Well, what are we going to say tonight that's going to alarm you? If what we've said tonight cannot persuade you to do anything, then you're basically, I guess, you're not ignorant, you're not stupid, but you're choosing to say, because, I don't think it's that way or I don't believe it's that way. It's not about what you think. It's not about what you believe. It's what it is. And we wouldn't be spending so much time trying to passionately engage you in digging into this and saying, okay, what do I got to do to save my family? What do I got to do to protect my family? What do I got to do to call my child to college and say, it's level 5, yellow duck. You got 10 minutes to be in the car. You got $100 in your console. You got all your important papers. You come home. You get here right now. For those of you that don't have a plan, get a plan. Get someplace and get quarantined. Get away. But again, you need to read some of the books that help with this. And like Doug was talking about, Google site that has NBC level 4 protection. You can have it for 10 years and never have to use it. But think about this. If you ever had to go out and look for food, wouldn't you rather go out in that garb than to go out in nothing? I don't care what people think I look like. If I'm alive, that's all my kids care about. I love my kids. I love my Lord. I love these people on the other line that are taking the time to listen to us. And we're just trying to persuade you with the evidence, not hyperbole, not hype, not trying to whip anybody up into a frenzy. There's nothing to be gained. We don't get anything out of this except we have a passion and a calling from God. Thank God Hagmann is on. And people, there is a good part of our government and there's a rogue part of our government. It's always been that way. It's always going to be that way. Just like there's good cops, bad cops. There's not so good, not good doctors sometimes. There's not good political leaders sometimes. But it's our responsibility to shine the light, to lead the way, to be an active voice, stand up, help your, whether it's your work or your community. Simple things like getting the Clorox wipes, getting bleach, getting latex kitchen gloves, getting booties. Wearing latex gloves, maybe two pair when you go to the store. I don't care what people think about. If I'm alive and my kids see me. And as a physician, I realized when that tornado hit, I saw it 5 seconds ahead of time. If I hadn't looked out the window, we'd all gotten killed. I looked out the window and it happened, and rooftops were hitting the ground, and I just yelled, run for cover. And we did in 90 seconds. The wind was it was unbelievable. They estimated the wind was probably around 250 to 300 miles an hour, and they almost changed it to an F6 rating. And it was so horrendous. And, there were a lot of young people that died that day. There were a lot of people's lives who were firemen and policemen whose lives were destroyed. So we're going to be on the front line when you come in. And, if you can prepare yourself, then you reduce the amount of people that we have to worry about, and you increase the number of people who can help. If you could just do some things, the water, you got to have a minimum of 2 gallons per person per day. You need to get a book. I read How to Survive the End of the World as We Know It by James Rawls. It's just a book. He was a military intelligence officer. He works with Steve and people like that. Steve has got his book, which I think is very appropriate for right now, particularly with this germ warfare, because you don't know where it's going to be. You don't see it. You need to order it. We spend a lot of money on things that we don't have to. These are things I believe are critical. And then the level 4 decontamination, the NBC, and the positive pressure, like Steve brought up, is very important. And when you call Bob, say, at Ready Made Resources, and you ask him, well, how does this work? I mean, what size do you get? Get the equipment and then put them all for each person in a duffel bag. And you put what it is, what's in there. And you need to get extra canisters. But like Steve is pointing out, if you can turn a negative pressure mask into a positive pressure mask, it's always blowing air into your mask. And these ones that I got from Bob, they have a little camelback port, and so I can drink water. When I exhale, carbon dioxide comes out. So air comes in, filtered through the filter, the little fan, and he uses 4 CR123 batteries. Get on the phone, get on Amazon, order some Synergy, rechargeable batteries. Have rechargeable batteries, but there's a variety of things that we could be preparing for just by preparing for this. And
hey, Doc,
I was watching.
Doctor?
Yeah.
I just got an email from Bob. The positive pressure little fans, and everybody who's ever owned a gas mask that uses 40 millimeter filters, they're an even better deal than I thought. They're $10 a piece, or 4 for $40. Now I know he's got access to a couple hundred, but just like the gloves. And by the way, when you send me your request for gloves, please give me a indication of size and quantity, and it'll have to be on a first come first serve because people are buying quite a few of them. And like I said, I've got thousands, but I don't know the size breakdown. And you want to have them a little bigger. They're not like latex surgical gloves. So please, ladies and gentlemen, when you send it to me, email, because tell me how many. Typically, what size you would prefer, and if I have to go up, like if you're a small, you may have to take a medium. But again, they have tight-fitting cotton gloves that fit within the butyl rubber outer gloves, so that's not an issue. You're not sewing or doing needlepoint.
When they go to, is it just stevequayle.com or?
No, they just email me at Steve777 at stevequayle.com. And ladies and gentlemen, too, I have a question that came in from a listener, Doctor. HIPAA-Cleanse, what's your take on HIPAA-Cleanse? Because obviously physicians use HIPAA-Cleanse? HIBICLENS?
We use HIPAA-Cleanse, and we use and we used to use mostly povidone or an iodine-based soap. HIPAA-Cleanse is very good. See, the trouble is, and I'm going to be just brutally honest here, we do all those measures, but I cannot tell you, we don't have enough information about Ebola.
Right.
I can't tell
what about
you
silver? What about silver, Doctor? I've got a lot of people asking about colloidal silver. And first of all, will you explain to people what a cytokine storm is, or cytokine, CYTOKINE? Because even because again, people think that, and I'm not putting anything down, and the deal is that once they get into the advanced stages of Ebola, I mean, it takes heroic measures to keep them alive. I guess the question is, do you believe that colloidal silver or nano silver taken in a prophylactic way will protect? And to my knowledge, no one's ever tested it.
Well, I'd say 3 things. Number one, the FDA issued a statement this weekend and said that anybody who was talking about silver or alternative methods to Ebola, they'd be subject to an FDA investigation and prosecution. So I'd say that. Number two is, if there may very well be some inhibitory characteristics to it, but again, it may depend on the amount of virus you get. It may be on the strain of virus you get. And so I think it'd be wrong to give people the indication that we know anything about silver. And I would not rely on that, because if I'm a physician, I know there are things in nature that help. I know, like, for example, MRSA, silver, colloidal silver on a leg that's got cellulitis, it'll oftentimes help kill MRSA, maybe when you can't get blood flow to it, i.e. antibiotics IV. Now, will that help in every case? No. So we have to be careful, because what I don't want to do is tell somebody something that gives them a false sense of security. And so I'd say at this point there's a lot of things that could be helpful, that might be helpful. We don't know. Again, the virus is so not poorly studied. It's poorly understood. But I would do everything I could, from Lysol to the Clorox wipes to the chlorhexidine, the soaps. A lot of online first aid kits. You can buy these things. You can buy them from medical supply stores. You can buy them from pharmacies. These are things, and like you said, you brought up a good point. I was going to mention something that people may not have thought about. It wouldn't be a bad idea, and it's cheap stuff, but go out and buy some lime granules, like you would put on your lime for your lawn. But if you had to use a latrine, or you had to dispose of waste in a contractor, really thick, heavy meal bags, if you were to put some lime on top of that, it would help kill the smell, and it would also help with, making it more, sterile, I'd say. That's what lime...
Right. It would do away with any inherent pathogens. Yep.
Yeah. And
by the way, ladies and gentlemen, hey, doctor, let me give out Bob's number too, 1-800-627-3809, 1-800-627-3809. And I know this. I know, having been in the business, I know that there are some good deals on long-term storage food like freeze-dried. Again, I don't sell it. Ready-Made Resources does. But I'm telling you point blank that here's how I can liken it. If 1,000 people ran to the door to acquire it now, and I know my numbers because, like I said, it was in that field, 1,000, maybe 2,000 max, every store that had any inventory would dry up within probably a matter of 24 to 48 hours, if not less. And so the point is that that's a critical statement. And the other thing is that don't be misled by phony calorie count. I mean, you've got to realize that under a stress situation, 400 calories isn't going to take anybody through the day. So the point is, right now, the freeze-dried food has never been cheaper per calorie than it is now. Again, that number is 1-800-627-3809. It's the only, the only thing that I'm telling people is this, is that at this point, what you can't afford, you get. What you can't afford, figure out a way to do it. And by the grace of God, I'm praying, and I'm saying this to all the people, if the Lord brings someone across your path that really gets it, and obviously I've had enough freeloaders in my life to make Clem Cadiddlehopper of, the Red Skelton show fame jealous. I mean, I've had, guys, I would say this, but here's the thing. Genuine people, we need to help them, ladies and gentlemen, by the grace of God. And I want to say this before we hang up. Thank each and every one of you that are continuing to bless the ministry of Jeremiah and his team right now on the boots on the ground in Iraq. The man is a remarkable man. He loves Jesus. He's got prayer backup. I'm asking the intercessors to keep him before the throne continually, that God would absolutely hide him in the secret place of Most High, that he'll be at the right place at the right time, never the wrong place at the wrong time, and that he will be one of the first fruits of the Scripture, the promise in Daniel, that they that know their God shall be strong and do exploits. And please keep the wives and the children of these men of God who are brave. I'm literally asking the Lord to allow me to wash their feet someday. So I'm praying, and that's not melodramatic. I intend to do that.
Yeah, I know you're serious. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm as serious as you get, because, again, I wish it were within my capability to fund a major counter to what's going on there. But I know this, it's within my ability and everyone listening's ability to basically pray as your life depends on it, because it's like we're talking about Ebola. Stop it there, it doesn't come here. Stop what's going on over there, it doesn't come here. And I want you to know that everyone must claim literally the promises of God. I posted Hebrews 11 up today, and I would encourage everyone to make that a matter of prayer and keep the intercessors, the full-time intercessors, keep them in prayer against the attacks that are coming upon them. Romy, Manette, Beata, these are three that are known personally to me. Keep these women and the men of God, and I don't single them out because they're special. It's just that I know that they literally take the word of the Lord seriously. But I also know this, that the attacks are increasing on the people of God. So in essence, we're trying to give them the knowledge. And forgive me, but the Word of God says that God's people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. May no one go from this show tonight not having been given a realistic presentation of the threat. And again, I'm saying this, that due to the cytokine explosion that takes place in a person's body once Ebola and stuff takes place, the best thing is preventative. The best thing is being where no one else is. The best thing is isolation. The best thing is absolute sterile practices. And you've got to make a checklist, just like a pilot. If you're going to the supermarket, for years, my wife always wears gloves. And I thought, man, she's smart in that. So the point is, and here's another place everybody's got to be careful, is gyms. GYMS, gymnasiums, because you know you don't know who's been in there, you don't know where their hands have been when they put them on the bars or the handles, and you know the point being is that that's a good place to wear gym gloves also. Right.
And, you know, I'd urge everybody, if there's some decontamination solutions, I mean, that Hazarid, you can get a concentrate, you can mix it up, they've got a decontaminator. You need to buy some extra pump-up sprayers in case we come to that, like like the ortho ones, because you may be spraying each other down with bleach solutions and that other. And I agree with Steve. You know, thank God for the people that are on the front line. I got just real quick here something, Steve, that's really strange. I popped this up, and this is Mail Online. Now, this is real. This is today. Horrifying moment, medic in biohazard suit boarded British Airlines jet over fears that a 10-year-old girl passenger was suffering from Ebola. More than 100 passengers were held on board in Aberdeen. Checks were carried out to see if there was any trace of Ebola virus. It followed reports of a girl being violently sick on the flight from London. The 10-year-old girl is believed to have started her journey in Nigeria. She was examined at the scene and taken to Children's Hospital. There had 100 persons on the flight. People literally broke out. Some are carrying their biohazard suits with them. So one thing I'd say is you can do, as a minimum, carry some extra gloves, if you got room for them, on your bag. Also carry some N95 masks. The N95 is better than no mask, and it filters out 95%. It's what we use if we go into a room with somebody who has suspected tuberculosis. And, folks, it still exists, and those poor Border Patrol people are getting inundated and slaughtered by all these diseases and then taking them home to their families. I mean, we need to keep our Border Patrol agents in our prayers, and these men and women are laying their life down every day just to be run over by our government that's letting all these people in. And at a time when we have a catastrophic illness, we need to be urging some political smartness here, and we already know that one of the worst, most vile group of people, the ISIS people, who some of them are American citizens, some of them are British citizens, they are bent on bringing destruction, another 9/11 terrorist attack. And I got to think about this. Of all the people that have died in the bush in West Africa, how easy it would have been, this has already been hypothesized, so we're not letting the cat out of the bag, how easy it would have been to gone in, got a bunch of vials of blood from people that just died, tell these people you're from the WHO, leave, they go, they know what to do with it, they bring it into America, they start spreading it around, or they infect some people. I mean, it doesn't take long to see how fast this goes. And our point is, and Steve's point is that when it happens, it's too late. Do you not get it, folks? When it happens, it's too late. Because there's going to be a run on the stores, like in the movie Contagion. There's going to be a run on the medicine. And, you know, if we can't even handle an ice storm without wiping out the store for 3 days without food, what makes you think that those drivers, okay, so there's no food, do you not think those trucks are not going to be carjacked on the interstate or on the highway by groups and thugs? I mean, it's social chaos. So
Right. Hey, and Doctor, I want to make this point because I'm going to have to leave before you sign off. But here's the deal: Doug sponsors American Survival Wholesale. I've met them, and here's what I'm trying to tell you, people: use the people that are sponsoring. Doug's sponsored by American Survival Wholesale. I mean, it's tough because And here's the thing I want to make clear: if you've got orders with them, keep your orders with them. But look, even American Survival Wholesale and Ready-Made Resources, they're only two stores. They have what they can have, but they've made it possible for Doug to stay on the air, as a sponsor. So please support them.
We should support them,
I don't sell anything except, I guess, gloves I've had in my storage for 5 years because I anticipated this day would come. And the point being is that American Wholesale, Survival Wholesale, I met the owners of that, and they're amazing people. They walk the walk and talk the talk. The only thing I'm trying to say is, look, support those who support Hagmann and Hagmann, just as I've asked you in the past to support Hagmann and Hagmann, because, again, the bottom line is that without Doug Hagmann, this sort of information would not be going out. Without Doug Hagmann, every time David Langford and I come on and we get to minister to 7 million people, it wouldn't come on. So, again, ladies and gentlemen, please, support American Survival Wholesale. They have stuff, and I'm just talking about one-item gloves and one item. It's just a little button thing that goes on, a battery-operated power. It's not a gas mask. It's not a filter. So if American Survival Wholesale sells it, and please, I don't know everything they sell, support the people that support Doug Hagmann. And, Doctor, I want to thank you. I've got to say goodbye because I just basically have something at 9 o'clock, and I've got to be there. But, bless you and thank you, Doug. Again, ladies and gentlemen, please take the doctor's closing comments seriously. Good night, everyone.
Steve, thank you. Good night, Steve.
Thank you, Steve. And I'm really grateful that Steve brought up the people that sponsor Doug's show, and I know Bob personally, and he would be very happy to see them get some notoriety and also some mention, because there's no way one entity can handle all this. But if they're sponsoring Doug's show, you should write this down. You should write the names down, because tomorrow you may forget, and you need to put them by your computer. You need to get on and start studying the page. Call them up, ask them what you would need for food, for water, for survival. And one of the things is a lot of, I call them prepping sites, don't really specialize in is the kind of equipment or clothing or that sort of thing that they're so knowledgeable about. And I would imagine Doug knows these people well, and they would be very knowledgeable, because Doug is a very detailed, a very information-backed. And I want to drive this home, since I've kind of really become acquainted with these guys, is they're only telling you a small fraction of what they really know. And they're doing that because they don't want to expose people in places where they're getting information. But, folks, this is the truth. This is not a entertainment show. This is not a, they're fighting for the same things that our forefathers came here for religious freedom, for freedom to live a life, the pursuit of happiness, and also equality, and also taking care of our mankind. There's opportunity, but there's forces of darkness and evil that have been on the face of the earth for 5,000 years, and nothing's new, and they're not going to go away. But the best way to fight that is through action and obedience and doing something. And maybe you get a game plan. And, Doug, did you say it's American Survival?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, AmericanSurvivalWholesale.com. As a matter of fact, the owner has agreed to come on tomorrow to talk about their NBC suits because of the native grade. And that was, believe it or not, Doc, that was kind of planned in advance, because we knew this issue was coming. We knew this issue was coming, and I got to tell you, we have to take, as you said, we've got to take responsibility for our own preps, our own preparation, because 9/11, you're not, or 911, you ain't going to be able to call 911 and get a response, or you really set the stage. So just to let people know, AmericanSurvivalWholesale.com. If you go to Hagmann and Hagmann.com, right on the front page there, featured is their NBC NATO grade, military grade suit. Great product. and then of course we buy. That's where we get our long-term food storage from, long-term storage food from. So all of this together. I mean, we have to be very proactive, don't we, Doctor? Because we're. Well, I got to tell you, it sounds like we're at the end of the game here, aren't we?
Well, we're getting in. Like you said, very well at the beginning of the last, at the very beginning of the last show we did. You said, "Are we at the very end of time?" And you said no. But we're getting into that period of time where these are the end times, and we're going to be strange. We're going to be facing a lot of different challenges. And so, what we're hoping to do is, stepping up to the plate and digging out the information and sharing it with you. Doug and his son are just pouring their heart out every night, and we're grateful for the people that are his sponsors because he couldn't stay on the air. And so support those who are supporting this educational program. And these people that have been supporting Doug, and he knows them personally, integrity, their life and hearts are in the right places with God, with their minds, and they're trying to do the same thing that we're all working as a team. This is not a competitive thing. This is not about a ratings thing. And I would ask you one thing, please, everybody in the audience, take time to go back and listen to this program again. Take notes, and there's references that I want that you need to know. One thing I do want to say, that Ed Isaac, who's with Samaritan's Purse, who was director of U.S. Disaster Aid International for years. He's impeccable credentials in our government. He's now with Samaritan's Purse. And his testimony at the subhearing of Congress, and also Dr. Frank Glover, there is so much information there, and they have been on the ground, and it begins to paint a picture, and you have to take all these pieces. It's doable, but you're going to have to stay at it every day. And some people think, well, it's doom and gloom. Don't tell me about it. Well, you know what? That's not what God tells us to do. God tells us to be responsible, to be accountable, and if we know something and don't do it, we're basically being disobedient. We're being dishonorable. Do not be dishonorable to your wife. Do not be dishonorable to your children. Do not be dishonorable to your parents, your brothers, your sisters, your fellow employees, your fellow church members, your fellow, co-workers. You need to learn this stuff and take it to them and say, I know, there's a lot of stuff going on, but there's some information here, and this is so, Doug and I and Steve, we hope it never happens. But it's better to be prepared and better to have something and not need it than to need it and not have it. And the good thing about all this equipment, and you can keep it for years, and it doesn't go out of style, and it doesn't ruin, okay? So store it properly. The one thing I'd like to say is once you get your suit, if you have a question, call these people, ask them about, how to set it up, make sure you got plenty of extra batteries. I would urge you to maybe whoever, if you're traveling on the road, maybe you put one of these in a duffel bag and your whole outfit, and you put it in a duffel bag and you put it in your car. So think about travel. Think about, if Doug comes on the air or if somebody issues an alert, what your plan is your family, how you're going to get to one place where you're going to hunker down. And, again, you're going to be faced with a challenge. Those that you've got to plan, you're there. Remember, if you open the door, you may bring it into the door. Your children your whole family may die as a result of it. We've seen it in West Africa. People's behavior is the same anywhere in the world. When you're in these catastrophic situations and you're trying to deal with it, and pray for all the healthcare workers that are over there in Liberia, Doctors Without Borders, Samaritan's Purse, SIM, people that are trying to contain it, and even the Russians. At the end of the day, whoever is able to control this, whoever is able to treat this, who's ever able to help us, well, they've saved lives. And our men and women in our military, pray for them because, they go out and they serve, whether it's on a military base here or in some desert or in some mountain. They're, in Iraq, or they're over in some country, the places that we don't even know about. Just pray for them and their families because they're facing these dangers, and we need to show them respect by being responsible and accountable. How sick it must make them to think that they're out there doing all this stuff with a glad heart for their country, and their citizens back home is doing nothing. I would like to see our country begin to talk and to urge each other to be accountable, and to change the elections, change the people that hold them, make phone calls. You just keep calling them. You say, well, in November, go vote. People say, well, I don't like the choices. That's not what we're supposed to do. Men and women died for our right to vote. And
That's
thank
right.
God for the Hagmanns.
Doctor, thank you so much. Unfortunately, we are absolutely out of time. I just want to thank you so much for your time tonight. God bless you, my friend. You stay safe until next time.
Thank you.
God bless.
Anytime I can help.
All right, Doctor. Thank you so much. That was Dr. S. Mendy, MD, folks. 3 hours of his time. You know how much the doctor's time is worth. Until tomorrow.